I thought we cared
apart from
about
when it doesn't.
Apart from when it doesn't. I thought we cared about police being under attack, didn't we? I know.
Yeah, I thought so.
It is just extraordinary. I don't know how people who still think that we don't have two-tier justice, we don't have two-tier policing. How can you justify saying that? What are you not seeing that the rest of us are seeing?
Exactly.
And why do the authorities keep doing that? I say if you're sending 2 coppers around to Alison Pearson's house, and the number of people who've come forward and said how many times they've had police turn up at their place.
I know, shocking state.
I mean, so, as I've said, feel free, turn up any time, guys. I'll put the kettle on.
I know, I'm waiting. I'm sure it will happen. By the way, good luck with President Xi in Brazil. Julia Hartley-Brewer is next. I'll see you tomorrow at 6. Enjoy.
The UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. A happy Monday morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me. Absolutely rip-roaring show with Mike Graham this morning. Plenty more to come over the next few hours, of course. And whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is lovely to have your company. Also very lovely to have the company of Claire Pearsall, who's joining us today, former Conservative Government Advisor. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Looking very glamorous.
Oh, for you, obviously, on a Monday.
All for me, all for me. We do our best for you, we do our best for you. Awful lot to talk about, at home and abroad. This is one of those many days that we get these days where the news just keeps on coming. Yes. And yesterday morning, we're trying let's try and, look ahead at what we're going to have. I mean, where do you even start? And even more today. I suppose one of the biggest news, of course, in terms of impacting Europe, is the US President Joe Biden has finally given Ukraine approval to use US-supplied long-range missiles to strike targets within Russia. Crucially, this is long-range missiles also allows, the missiles that we have, which require US permission because they use their radar, to be used in Russia as well. Now, there's been some talk that, this is basically about starting World War III. That's what Donald Trump Jr. has had to say. Quite interested to find out what's going on there. We'll talk to Cormac Smith, a former advisor to the Ukrainian government, about how significant that is. But with world affairs dominating because the G20 summit is taking place in Brazil today, Keir Starmer has said he wants a serious relationship with China ahead of his first face-to-face talks with the President Xi Jinping today at G20. It's a one-on-one meeting. I wonder, though, whether you think Britain should be cozying up with China. I mean, they spy on us, they cyber hack us, they've sanctioned a number of our MPs. Still waiting for those reparations from COVID, guys. Just wondering when those are happening. Thought this government was quite big on reparations for bad dealings in the past. And also, I mean, let's face it, China basically controls the world economy now, probably even more than America in terms of actually the supply of rare earth metals. Oh, by the way, all of our green nonsense, solar panels and all that, all being made in China, most of our cars as well, it would seem. So should Britain be cozying up to China? I want to know whether we should. I want to know whether we shouldn't, and tell us, crucially, why. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222. You can also send us a message on X at Talk TV. Such as people are still here on X and on Twitter. Apparently all the lefties have all gone off to something called Blue Sky. Bye. It's been lovely knowing you. Finally, the conversation has improved. But I'd love to also hear from you if you want to leave a message on our YouTube page. Don't forget that calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about migration. Always in the news as well. The Prime Minister is planning Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister-style migrant deals with the likes of Vietnam, Iraq and Kurdistan, offering them financial incentives to curb migrant departures. I'm just not sure that is going to stop people wanting to leave any of those countries. But also going to be talking about farmers. Of course, campaigners have warned that farmers have nothing to lose amid fears that protests over the government's inheritance tax rate will disrupt our food supplies. So we'll talk about all of that. Lots of top guests coming up. This is, of course, Talk, the home of common sense. And we expect a lot of common sense. No pressure here, Claire, from Claire. Claire, let's start with China.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer meeting with Xi Jinping. I mean, let's be honest. Xi Jinping's going to run rings around. President for life, tyrannical, murderous dictator, Xi Jinping, who for some reason has the red carpet rolled out for him as if he's a normal person. But nevertheless, the controller of the second biggest military in the world and the second biggest economy has basically our economy, our governments, our universities, our institutions, frankly, over a barrel right now. And bad things are happening to us as a result of that. There's going to be a one-on-one meeting. Question I'm asking our audience, should Britain be cozying up to China? Yes or no?
I don't think this is going to be cozying up. You can't imagine Keir Starmer being cosy with anybody, can you?
At least for his wife.
I think this is going to be one of those meetings that's just, we're going to have this chat and we're going to look as if we're being very serious. If I was Keir Starmer, I would be going after President Xi for human rights abuses, what's happening to the Uyghurs, what's happening to Hong Kong nationals, the appalling treatment of Hong Kong nationals, and even in this country, they're being surveilled. So I think that those questions need to be asked. Now, whether they will or whether they'll be listened to is a whole other thing, but I don't think we can afford to ignore President Xi.
No, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? Because, we don't get to choose who other countries either elect or are bullied into keep in as presidents for life. Don't get any ideas, Keir, my love. Don't get any ideas. Don't get any ideas, Trump, also. You have to deal with the world as it is. And it's like, people saying, oh, we shouldn't have any dealings with Saudi Arabia. No, Saudi Arabia is another horrible, tyrannical, murderous regime. What's the option? The mad mullahs, or absolute full-on civil war there, or all these, all these absolute kleptomaniac, princes. Well, kleptocratic. Yeah. You take the least worst option. There's very rarely a Tory Lib Dem coalition option. And I'm just saying, those are the deals we get. But I just don't see any of our political leaders properly standing up to China because goodness me, I mean, David Cameron and George Osborne were absolutely shocking in terms of, for want of a better phrase, kowtowing to China. They've bought up our universities. Oh, we give a load of money for this university. Yeah. Oh, well, then could we not criticise China? Could we not criticise China? Because that's all just a bit, would you mind just, shh, because we won't get any funding. They completely got us over a barrel on net zero because while we sign up to the madness, they're busy. We're building wind turbines and solar panel farms. Of course we are. We're also building a new coal-fired power station every week, which is how we are producing cheap, abundant, secure energy to be able to make things cheaply to sell to the West, ruining our economy, the madness of that. They bought up pretty much every rare earth mineral in the world. They can switch that stuff off anytime tomorrow. They're clearly threatening Taiwan. What they're doing, even down to things like, the worries about the Chagos Islands and the madness of giving those away to the Mauritians, who are completely in hock to the Chinese, as are most of the Caribbean nations, many African nations. While we're operating on not even a 4-year electoral cycle, but a 24-hour day media cycle in our government, they're operating on a 40-year cycle. In China, not even a 10-year plan, 40 years. They have long-term ambitions, and those ambitions are very bad. And if you don't want, the horrible colonial West in charge of things, I hate to tell you, the other option's even worse, guys. I think this man is genuinely terrifying, and he speaks softly, and he's Mr. Lovely, but he's not. He's a murderer. He is no better or worse than Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at also the access they had into security systems, cameras, 5G network in the United Kingdom, we gave them those contracts. We said, yes, come and put your cameras up and it'll all be fine.
Yeah, brilliant idea.
Clearly not. And I think you have to...
But how could anybody involved in our security or our government and on that side of things ever thought that was a good idea, unless, frankly, they were in hock to China?
Well,
I'm sorry, it's not possible to think that was a good idea.
No, I think anybody can tell you that. I'm no expert in foreign policy, and even I can see that. Yeah. So you would assume that the people around David Cameron and George Osborne would have had the same view, but clearly
not. I'm just saying. Apologies, everybody. Right, try to lose the cough. Let's also talk about other foreign policy, Ukraine. And again, all of this does impact us. It impacts the cost of our cost of living, our standard of living, our freedoms, our anything extra we have to spend on defence impacts what we can spend on schools and hospitals and transport. So it's really important to remember that when we talk about foreign policy. But Joe Biden has authorised Ukraine to use long-range missiles inside Russia. These missiles that they have not been allowed to use until now. And again, this is clearly not just because, we've seen Starmer and Macron managing to charm Biden. No, he didn't announce this before the presidential election, and now he's announcing it. Now, there's some talk that this could hasten the end of the war. Even Zelensky said Trump's arrival could hasten the end of the war. Realistically, for Trump, there are probably going to be some sort of negotiations to end the war. Yeah. At that point, you need Ukraine to be in the strongest possible position. I would support Ukraine not doing that if that's what they don't want to do. I think people should, they've got a right of self-determination, but holding on to Russian territory, the ability to hit a Russian supply lines and things is absolutely vital. Do you think it was right, and do you think that we should approve our missiles for use there as well?
See, this is a really difficult one because all of the arguments had been against us allowing the Storm Shadow missiles to be used because this would invoke World War III, which everybody seems to think is being invoked at the moment anyway. Yeah. So I think that we do need to bring an end to this. This does nothing for the stability of Europe or the UK, but also for the people of Ukraine. Why should they be bombed on a daily basis? Why should they have to give away their territory to somebody who's just fancy taking it? Well, we see bringing an end to it. The best way of bringing an end to it is defeating Russia and pushing them back to Russian borders and saying, here you go, you want to try again? The whole of NATO is going to be behind Ukraine. That's what we should do, instead of giving them just enough to survive but not enough to win. We could defeat... There's no way in the world Western forces couldn't defeat Russian forces. I mean, they're so depleted. It's interesting as to what the red lines are going to be, because we keep being told that this is going to cross Putin's red line. Well, there have been hundreds of those.
Putin crossed our red line. I mean, I'm sorry.
Exactly, when he came in and just took the territory that he wanted.
Well, we shall see. Now, the Russians have already said this is, ramping up tensions. No, you cross the border. That's what ramped up tensions. We tried that appeasement thing, 1930s. Do you remember that? Didn't turn out so well, guys. Didn't turn out so well. Read the room. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you want to get in touch on that, by the way, as well. 0344 499 1000. Just some breaking news, by the way. The Metropolitan Police have just announced that two police constables, Jerome Beasley and Luke Robinson, have both been charged with 4 counts of sexual assault against a woman in central London in April while off duty. Again, we're seeing more and more of these people being sacked, but also actual prosecutions of police officers in the wake of charges being, brought against them, allegations made against them. Of course, this hasn't gone to court yet, but I think a lot of this is to be welcomed, isn't it? That we're actually seeing where there is suspected wrongdoing, and again, only suspected at this current time, that there is a proper investigation and actions are taken and things aren't covered up.
Yeah, and without doubt, these people, if they are guilty, need to be taken and dealt with
and
properly.
Shouldn't be police officers.
And shouldn't be police officers. But it highlights that these things happen with such regularity. It's really quite frightening.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't seem to be unusual that there are allegations of this sort, does it? Let's also talk about migrants, often in the news. And we've got Labour apparently planning a sort of following in the wakes of, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni-style migrant deals with the likes of Vietnam, Iraq, Kurdistan and others. And the idea is, as she has done with
Libya.
She's done Albania as well. Yeah. She's paying them to take them, but actually doing a deal and saying, look, you need to take these people back and basically stop them coming in the first place. Do you think any of this is likely to work?
Looking at the list of countries that Starmer has picked, no, I don't hold out an awful lot of hope.
I'd rather not stay in Vietnam. Lovely place for a holiday. Wouldn't want to live there.
But also the numbers arriving from Vietnam, I think the last figures I saw were just under 1,100.
Yeah.
Which, given the sort of 30-odd thousand across the channel, that's a very small percentage. And how are you going to suggest that these people spend that money? How are you going to measure the outcomes against it? They can just turn around and say, yeah, we've stopped 80% of crossings.
Yeah. Well, it's about sort of providing the border security at those countries, but
is that money going to go? If you're just handing it over, how can you be sure that it's going to be spent that way?
And yes, I mean, you having worked as an advisor in the Home Office, probably more aware of this than most people. Let's also talk about farmers. We have farmers doing major protests outside Westminster on Tuesday. Lots of calls from the National Farmers Union that these protests are legal, and obviously, all protests need to be legal, but there is a right to peaceful protest, and particularly when it's about lobbying MPs over the budget. Again, farmers were told that they wouldn't be facing inheritance tax. They're now facing 20% inheritance tax. And you think, over farms worth more than £1 million. Do you think, well, goodness me, you've got that sort of asset. The trouble is, this isn't how farm... if you've got £1 million farm, it doesn't mean you're rich in a weird sort of way. It's a lot of land, but people are kind of living, rather meagre lives and working, 7-day weeks, 365 days of the year. As we've seen, Jeremy Clarkson, you see what happens on his farm, and you see the life that people have, and how quickly, things can tip over if you've got, one bad summer, and that's it. All your savings are gone overnight, and you're dealing with everything. But there are going to be protests, and I think they're going to get an awful lot of public support. Although it was interesting this morning, you could already see someone pointing out on my Twitter feed, The Guardian already trying to frame these as horrible far-right people. These nasty people demonstrating. These are just sort of ordinary people doing very vital work. But we've had, haven't we, politicians saying, we don't need... John McTernan, he was on... There are rival channels. He was on a TV show last week saying, no, we don't need... we should take them on like we took on the miners when Thatcher was in. We don't need farmers. I hate to tell you, mate, we absolutely do. They're the most vital workers in the country.
And it's so many industries. And I'm sure... I know John McTernan, and I was so surprised when he came out with that. Does he not have milk? Does he not like some bread every now and again? Because those things will go. If you're not going to have dairy cattle, you're not going to have wheat.
Let's have a little blockade around John McTernan's house for food deliveries, and then we'll see what he thinks about farmers. I'm just saying. Yeah, by the way, COVID, the lockdown, if the farmers weren't allowed to go and work and the bin men weren't allowed to go and work, I'm telling you right now, and the coffee, people serving coffee deliveries, trust me, that lockdown would have been over in 3 days. Yeah. Anyway, 10:18 is the time. Up next, we're going to talk to Rupert Lowe, who's a Reform UK MP, about, well, an awful lot of these foreign affairs, but also Nigel Farage saying that actually they are going to go ahead with that private prosecution of 2 brothers who attacked 3 police officers at Manchester Airport in the summer. Why have they not been prosecuted yet? We'll find out about that up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you so much for your company. Claire Pearsall's still here, and delighted to welcome Rupert Lowe, Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth, to the show. Good morning to you, Rupert.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank
How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you so much for joining us. I just want to ask you, just very briefly, just to get your response to Keir Starmer holding meetings with, holding a meeting with the President of China, Xi Jinping, at the G20 summit today. Should Britain be cozying up to China? That's what we're asking our audience on 0344 499 1000. Just briefly, should he be?
Well, I think, Julia, China is part of the sort of global elite, if you like. They are part of the world, and I think we have to engage with them. I don't think we necessarily have to agree with everything that they do. And in some ways, I think the juxtaposed sort of Keir Starmer against President Xi is probably an interesting spectacle. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer will come out on top, Julia.
That's kind of my feel about it. He'll run rings round him, will he not? As indeed, I wonder whether or not the governments of Vietnam, Kurdistan, Iraq and elsewhere will run rings round the Starmer government as well with their plan for Georgia Meloni.
Well, Julia, given the front bench business experience, I think it's probably a certainty.
Probably a certainty. Well, yeah, I just explained Georgia Meloni stars, the Italian premier, her migrant deals. She's done deals with Albania, where obviously, you know, sending people there to be processed, but she also has done deals with other countries, sort of, you know, Libya and others, you know, to beef up their border security, to stop people getting into the Med and then arriving on Italian shores in the first place. Now, we've been doing that with France. Hasn't worked so well so far. What do you make of the plans for migrant deals with Vietnam, Kurdistan and Iraq as well?
Well, look, Julia, I'm not sure we can rely on any third party to solve this problem for us. I think what we've got to do is solve it for ourselves. So, as you know, I'm very keen that we strengthen our approach to this. I think we should learn from what Australia has done. We should obviously stop the boats arriving. If they do arrive, I'm of the view these people, rather than being made welcome, you know, given bottles of water, spending money, comfortable hotels, I would personally put them into detention centres until we can deport them.
Oh, but you know as well as I do, our laws are not going to allow, and certainly not under this lot, are going to allow people to be held in detention centres realistically for years on end. Because you can't
our laws don't stop us holding them in detention, and I frankly think that for these people to be coming in and distributed to, I mean, recently it was Altrincham, but it's other parts of the country. I mean, these are fighting-age young men. We don't know what their intentions are. Most of them have lobbed their passports into the sea before they've arrived, so we don't even know their age. Many of them are saying they're actually younger than they are. And
we've had 24-year-olds put into schools, haven't we? I mean, it's quite absurd and very dangerous.
It doesn't bear thinking about. And the job of the government is to look after the interests of the British people, the people who live honestly, live decently, pay their taxes, and effectively are one of the most decent nations on earth. And the job of the government is to protect their interests. It is not to plant pods of young fighting-age men in honest, decent, law-abiding communities. And frankly, for the taxpayer to have to pay for all this is complete nonsense. So I think we've got to start to get tough. There's nothing under the ECHR to stop us setting up detention centres. We've just got to start to man up a bit and behave with some form of logical common sense, which is what we seem to have lost sight of.
We should try that. So I wonder if it would catch on with voters. I want to ask you about a specific case, extraordinary decision from an asylum tribunal, which is that a sex offender, a paedophile, convicted of sexually assaulting not just his own young stepdaughter and two other young girls in the same family. He's from the Democratic Republic of Congo. Basically, a tribunal ruled that they couldn't kick him out of Scotland, where he was living, because it would affect his family life, and he had a right under human rights legislation to a family life, so he couldn't be deported back to his African homeland because it would negatively impact the well-being of his wife and his 3 children, who the sexual offences were not committed against, and so he's allowed to stay in this country, despite having been jailed for 3 years back in 2020. So we've got a guy who's a convicted paedophile. We know he's a danger, but his right to a family life trumps our right to safety. What do you make of this case?
Complete nonsense, Julia. But then, as you know from being on your show before, I'm in favour of repealing the Human Rights Act, which embeds within it the ECHR. So I think it's all symptomatic of what's happened to this country. You know, ultimately, you've got to look at the causes of all this, and the causes, I think, are basically Tony Blair and Gordon Brown creating a dependency culture, bringing in all this nonsensical legislation like the ECHR, like the Equality Act, which ultimately has, I think, polluted people's relationships with each other. And we get to the stage now where, as you say, we're bringing in dangerous people from other countries and allowing them to stay when they should be deported. Now, I don't know where the truth lies over this Southport nonsense, but there are a lot of rumours flying around, and if any of them are vaguely true, Julia, this is going to go to that point as well. Yeah. We're not supposed to talk about it, parliamentary privilege was overridden the other day in the House of Commons, which in itself is undemocratic and flies in the face of our Constitution. So I think transparent government is good government. The taxpayer should be the boss, and they deserve transparency, total transparency, and they deserve to be put at the top of the agenda. And I frankly can't understand why any government would think that isn't the case.
No, and yet we've had a series of governments who don't. What do you make also, we talk of transparency, why on earth we have not yet seen prosecution of two brothers seen on CCTV viciously assaulting 3 police officers, including punching repeatedly a young WPC in the face as they were facing arrest. This is back on July the 23rd at Manchester Airport. We also saw that footage. Of course, the first footage that was put out, we only saw the police officer, one of the policeman, kicking a man on the floor, kicking him in the head. And then we saw the full video, which showed the context of that, which made it rather different. Almost 4 months on, still no prosecution. People are not even involved in riots, Southport. People who just posted tweets that even deleted, facing jail. Already some of them behind bars. We've had the police turning up at the door of the likes of the Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson, many others who are having their commentary on political life being policed constantly, and yet no charges as yet for 2 men on camera committing vicious, repeated assaults on our serving police officers. Now, we know that your boss, Nigel Farage, is planning to actually go ahead 4 months on with that private prosecution. So when does that start, and how will that work?
Well, we announced it last night, Julia. So the 5 of us signed a letter. As you probably know, the IOPC and the Crown Prosecution Service seem to be dragging their heels, and meanwhile, there are 2 police officers who, in my view, behave better than well. And I think, in my view, those 2 miscreants who clearly broke the nose of the police lady. I mean, when I was brought up, if you start bashing police officers around, you expect to be in prison immediately. Yeah. And I think, if we don't protect our police force, they're not going to respond as they should. We're not going to encourage the level of police people that we need. And I think the police bosses, like a lot of our leaders, have become woke and ineffective, and they're frightened to do things that are right because they're worried about upsetting racial minorities within the country. My view is we don't want 2-tier policing. We want the law to apply to everybody equally. And as you say, this footage came out. It's been leaked. I think there's a bigger investigation going on about who leaked the footage.
Yeah, because that's the concern.
rather than actually dealing with the issue. So we've reached the end of our tether in terms of time, and we've got the funding to, as we say, do the private prosecution, and we're going to set that in motion, as we said last night. And Nigel and Richard did a piece in the Telegraph about it. So. Yeah.
And at any point, the CPS could choose. They could take it over and they could follow the prosecution. But we've got to ask, the wheels of justice running so slowly, but as you say, more interest in who leaked the CCTV than there is in, charging 2 men caught on camera, evidence before our eyes, repeatedly assaulting police officers.
I think both of them, Julia, were lucky not to be shot. And I think if you attack armed police officers and you break the nose of a policewoman, arguably the police were well within their rights to shoot them. And
you know what would happen then? The police would already have been charged with a racial offence. You know that as well as I do. Look, I know you're going to have to go, Rup. You've got other business to attend. Reform UK MP Rup, great to have your thoughts on all those stories. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Claire Pearsall, just on the Manchester Airport issue, it is mind-blowing to us when we're watching this 2-tier policing that we are seeing. Post Southport, the riots that took place in a Muslim and Romanian community, but no one worrying about prosecutions there. The reaction from the politicians to both of those. There are so many cases coming before the courts. 16-year-olds who she just live streamed footage, weren't even at the events. And facing prison time. A lot of young people, I think, especially given some really bad legal advice. Yeah. And I really think we need to have some challenges on some of this. And I'm not saying, these people did a good thing. I'm just saying that lots of people do silly, misjudged things but shouldn't be in prison. And yet people who are caught on camera committing the most outrageous assaults on police officers. I mean, you know, because it's not sub judice at the moment, because of course it's not, because they haven't been brought any charges or not charged. What, you work at the Home Office, we're told, oh, there's operational independence. I mean, operational independence, my backside. Of course it isn't. They're able to, of course not. What's going on?
Well, I think that this is with the Crown Prosecution Service, so the delays in my mind are with the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, they seem to be able to move incredibly quickly if somebody has
if there's a 16-year-old who's written something on TikTok.
Yeah, or a playground dispute between some teenage girls, and then suddenly they're all over it. So I think that we need to understand where the hold-ups are in the justice system. That's something that the Justice Secretary should be looking at very, very quickly as to why they are prioritising smaller cases over these large cases, which actually do need to.
And rape cases, by the way, not going to court for 4 years now.
Yeah,
I mean,
ridiculous.
routine. It's really, really
it's dangerous.
You're not getting justice after 4 years.
No, you're
stop.
really not.
Is something going horribly wrong? Yes, I'm going to be very clear. I think the Tories are to blame for years and years of underfunding of the justice system, where that's what's got us to where we are. So I mean, you know, I'm an equal opportunity blamer. I blame the people. I don't care about people's politics. Can you do the job? It's all I want to know. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Love to hear your thoughts on China as well. Should Britain be cozying up to China? Tell us why we should. Tell us why we shouldn't. Major military and economic power. Should we be making sure we've got them on side? You have to, you know, Keir Starmer was holding a private meeting with President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Brazil. You know, you have to deal with the world leaders you have to deal with. It's better for us to have a bit of jaw rather than war, would you say? Or are we at risk of, what a better phrase, kowtowing to the Chinese? Love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to be talking about China and Ukraine with Cormac Smith, and we'll be talking to sheep farmer Gareth Wynne-Jones about the farmers' protest starting tomorrow in Westminster. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, coming up to 10:38. Coming up very good soon, we're going to be talking to a farmer joining those protests in Westminster. Why are they protesting and what do they hope to achieve? We'll talk about that in a few moments. First up, though, let's talk about what's going on, not just with China, but also Ukraine with Cormac Smith. He's a former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry and joins us now. Good morning to you, Cormac.
Julia, good morning.
Always good to get you. Lovely to get you on the show. Now, of course, a lot of world attention has gone, about Donald Trump a lot lately. We've been talking a lot about what's going on in the Middle East. Less focus on Ukraine, but there's been this full-on push from Ukraine, desperate to get access to these long-range missiles to fire into Russian territory, attack supply lines, defend their position in Kursk, and all of that. And when we finally had that announcement from Joe Biden yesterday about actually America would give permission, that would pave the way for Britain and France to give their long-range missiles to be used in Ukraine on Russian territory too. What is the significance of the Biden decision, and what's the significance of the timing as well?
Well, Julia, look, I have been saying for some time that this decision would not come until after the elections. Yeah. I think that Joe Biden was afraid of damaging the Democratic chances in those elections. That's all now gone. Yeah. Better late than never is what I would say. But, this permission should have been given, and these long-range weapons, and from the Americans in particular, the ATACMS, should have been provided years ago. It would have literally saved tens of thousands of innocent Ukrainian lives. So while I welcome it, I do say that it should have been done far earlier. It is significant, and we don't know what's going to happen with Donald Trump, although I have said that there could be a silver lining in Ukraine with Donald Trump, as it might make European leaders finally wake up. Yeah. And realise that Europe has to stand on our own 2 feet.
Yeah, I mean, one thing Donald Trump has always been right about is European leaders, shouldn't rely on American taxpayers to fund their security. Is there also an element where, again, this push for Joe Biden to allow all these big loans, was it tens of billions in loans, actually a lot of it simply from funding package from frozen Russian assets abroad being getting to Ukraine before Donald Trump comes in, because there's this fear that Donald Trump says, I'm going to insist that we have peace on day one. Now, that involves both sides coming to the party and coming to the table, doesn't it? But I wonder whether Donald Trump will be quite as keen on that once he gets into office.
Well, Donald Trump is famously unpredictable. And I have said recently that, the last time Donald Trump met Vladimir Putin was flying high, and Donald Trump was possibly at his lowest nadir ever. It was 2019, and he was going through impeachment. Yeah. Donald Trump has never been more powerful in his life, and he has at his fingertips the world's most powerful military. America spends as much as the next 10 nations combined in military might. So there is no doubt that America has the ability, if it so wishes, to end this war, and to end this war in Ukraine's favor. I do not believe that is going to be achieved at the negotiating table. No. Because Putin negotiates in bad faith and always breaks his word on anything to do with Ukraine. Yeah. And, Peskov, Putin's spokesman in the Kremlin, has just come out and said that a freezing of the current lines is out of the question. So the Russians are talking very, very aggressively on this. Putin will only stop when he has stopped.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Look, I mean, the statement from, as you mentioned, from the Kremlin says this would in a significant way change the very nature of the conflict. It would mean that NATO countries are at war with Russia. Now, we're constantly told we can't upgrade this war. Donald Trump Jr., one of Donald Trump's sons, has said this is almost like, Joe Biden trying to start World War III before the new president comes in, who has a mandate to end that war from the American people, which I believe is the case. But, a lot of people say wars end at the negotiating table. Well, I mean, they don't. Wars end with someone winning, and then you go to the table afterwards, surely.
Look, Julia, the Second World War didn't end at the negotiating table, and it never could. It was only going to end when the greatest evil that the world had thus far seen was stopped. And I apply the exact same standards to Vladimir Putin. I think we can take with a pinch of salt anything that Don Jr. says, because I'm sure he has said it with the full agreement of his father. But, his father is a disruptor, and his father we can only guess on what his father's real intentions are. Yeah. As much as, there's probably only one thing I've ever agreed with Donald Trump on, and that's that European members of NATO needed to pay more. Yeah. And indeed, even though the UK has been, ahead of the pack and the greatest supporter of Ukraine in the last 2 or 3 years, we need to spend more on defence. Yeah. We're up to, I believe, 2.3, but the Labour government is really delaying on that original.
Well, but also even delaying, 2.5. I mean, sorry, 2.5 doesn't touch the sides of the predicament that we are in the West. We are going to have to spend a lot more than that, and whether we like it or not, we're going to have to do that. Can I ask you just finally about China, because I know you look at world affairs, across the board. It is interesting, Putin is completely out in the cold as a murderous, dictator. But Keir Starmer at the G20 summit in Brazil will be rolling out the red carpet, having a one-on-one with Xi Jinping, also a murderous, tyrannical dictator who poses a threat to the world and to our allies like Taiwan and the Uyghur people, the Hong Kong people, who sanctioned British MPs, delivered COVID pandemic to the world. Still waiting for my reparations for that. Should we be, for want of a better phrase, cozying up to Xi Jinping, or is that just, frankly, an economic necessity?
I don't think we should be cozying up to Xi Jinping, but I do think it's correct that the Prime Minister talks to him. But if I could be so bold as to offer, as a former advisor to Ukraine's foreign minister, if I could offer some advice to Keir Starmer, it would be this: if you shake hands with China, count your fingers afterwards.
Good advice.
China is at the heart of an axis of evil, China, Russia, Iran and North Korea, who are bent on the destruction of our rules-based order and our way of life. And that rules-based order may be imperfect, but if it stands for one thing, it is that you cannot simply invade a neighbour and rape, plunder, pillage and murder just to take what you want.
Absolutely. Cormac Smith, always so good to talk to you, sir. Former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. Thank you for that. Claire Pistol, former government advisor here. What do you make of what he had to say?
Well, I think his advice at the end is absolutely spot on. We have to be incredibly careful what is going on here. But also just seeing some news breaking that a Russian ballet dancer who was critical of Putin has sadly fallen from a 5th floor window.
Oh, funny that. It's amazing. Don't go near any windows or,
Yes, stay away from doors and high floors.
It is just extraordinary.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're dealing with.
Your thoughts have been coming in thick and fast. Packed a little bit of a few extra guests in today, so we are going to get to more of your calls and texts in the next half hour, I absolutely promise. But lots of messages coming in about China. I'm asking, should Britain cozy up to China? Tell us why they should, tell us why they shouldn't. Martin says, big mistake. This is Keir Starmer selling his soul. John says they already do cozy up to China. Our universities kowtow to them all the time, which they do. Lynn says, is he going to ask for compensation for the made in China COVID virus? Isn't it weird that no one is pushing that agenda? But, let's still talk about reparations for something that happened 300 years ago. Damien says, when we have spent years outsourcing manufacturing to China, what choice do we have? And Stephen says, we've already cozied up to them by giving them the Chagos Islands. That pretty much is what we've done. Mauritius has signed up to that. Graham says, Starmer will no doubt ask for tips on how to suppress the population. Well, yeah. I mean, the CCTV, the silencing of free speech. I mean, he's got a lot more in common with Xi Jinping than he thinks. Andrew says Starmer is taking lessons from China on how to control us back in the UK. And Belinda says, absolutely not. I mean, look at who we have in government here. I'm sure they would love to cozy up to China, but I don't think many Brits would be happy with that. Do get your thoughts in. Love to hear your thoughts on that. We'll get to them after 11. 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to be talking to one of the many farmers joining those protests in Westminster tomorrow against the inheritance tax raid on family farms. That's up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
The idea of going on what I call the Taliban cop conference.
Yes.
Was just absurd.
With, by the way, 470 other people he took with him.
Of whom 350 were public servants.
Yeah.
I mean, I call it the Everest of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
They were basically going on their own net zero holiday. That's what it was.
Yeah.
At our expense. Millions and millions of pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you needed 20 officials. You didn't need 350.
What did you do with it? Yeah, I mean, 470 people.
But don't worry, the BBC sent only 30, so that's fine.
30. Brilliant. Unbelievable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor, is to us. I'd love to hear your thoughts in a moment, Claire, about how the Conservatives would be handling this issue. But tomorrow we are going to see a major farmers' protest outside Westminster. Lots of talk from National Farmers Union, others going, got to keep it all legal to keep public support. But an awful lot of public support for farmers over their inheritance tax rate. They're going to be facing 20% on family farms that are handed down through the generations, worth more than £1 million, which sounds like an awful lot of money to most of us, does it not? However, an awful lot of those farmers actually ain't living the good life. They're living and working a very hard life, and that will basically mean they'll have to sell up those farms, and then they won't be able to produce a lot of the food that we do enjoy in this country. Well, let's talk about this with one of the people planning to join that demonstration tomorrow, and that is cow and sheep farmer Gareth Wynne-Jones. Good morning to you, Gareth.
How are you?
Oh, lovely to talk to you, sir. Now, tell us, why are you attending this protest?
Well, to air our frustrations to government, just hopefully they can listen. So we were in Llandudno on Saturday in the Welsh Labour Conference. Quite a few hundred farmers turned up with their tractors, their lorries and pickups, hopefully to have a chat with Mr Starmer, but yeah, he ran out the back door.
Yeah, I did think that was pretty poor. You know, there were so many farmers there. You know, and also, if you can justify your policy in the budget, then you should be able to justify it and hold your own. Explain to us, because it is so difficult. Most of us, you know, we're not in the farming world. A lot of us are townies. We don't deal with this. A lot of people don't even know, you know, where the food comes from, for goodness sake. Explain to us why a 20% inheritance tax on farms worth more than £1 million, why there is going to be an issue for individual farmers and why it's going to end up being an issue for all of us as well.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. I'm more worried about you as well. And I mean, and the poorer people within society. Now, you know, this land behind me, my family's been on it for 375 years. Yeah. My father's 88. He has never had the passport. He's never had the holiday. He's never bought a new car. Okay, he's worked all his life to produce food that's affordable to feed the nation, like many other farmers. Yeah. Okay, our job is to produce food. We don't want to go out and protest. We don't want to go out and demonstrate. We don't want to waste our time. We want to do our job. Now, this 20% inheritance tax will have to come from somewhere with businesses. Okay, we are on our knees already. This farming lack is not fun at the moment. It's 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and it's not profitable. So this land is our working collateral. This is what we need to make sure we can produce food affordably. Yeah. If we don't, we have to put 20% on the products we're producing, which will be our lamb, our beef, our milk, our pork, our grains. And don't forget, everything starts from surf or turf. It's coming from the ground. And that's what worries me as a farmer, is the poorer people in society are going to have another massive hike in food inflation. And that is if food's still here. if we can still produce enough food. We've got global problems with food production, and we should be, in this country, putting food security right at the top.
Oh, I mean, amen to that. Well, look, we learned during COVID, you know, how vital, you know, what do we really need? And we know that farmers are vital.
I'll give you an example during COVID. Do you remember the toilet roll fiasco?
Yeah.
Well, you imagine that with food. You imagine them shelves going empty and the people in the inner cities, the poorer people in society, not being able to get food.
Yeah.
You know, we need to
and will it actually come to that? Because you saying the key thing is here, again, I suppose if people think, oh, you own all this wonderful land and it's worth more than £1 million, you're rich, living the life of Riley, and you're explaining how you're really not. Your land is effectively it's like your factory. You can't do the job if you don't have the full of the factory. So you're saying that sort of when it's handed on from your dad to you to your son or daughter, that if you lose 20% of it, you haven't got the money to pay that 20%.
No,
so you'd have to sell the farm, and at that point you then can't produce it. But what happens to that farmland? Because won't that farmland just go to someone else or a bigger company or another family? They'll produce food.
Well, it looks like to me that they want the multinationals coming up here and breaking family farms.
Won't we still have food then, though? I mean, the reality is they're still going to make food.
If we're growing trees and putting solar farms onto this land, no, we will not have food. We are on the edge. Now, I'd like to tell you as well a little bit about some of the facts. So, Rachel Reeves has said 20% of family farms will be affected. And if you were looking at figures now, it'll be closer to 60 to 70%. So her maths aren't very good. And the Treasury's maths aren't very good. Now, if they were going to be hitting the people that have come, you know, the big investors into land that are hiding money to get away with inheritance tax, well, if they would have put farms on 8-9 million at the top of that job, I think maybe a lot of people would have looked at it. But what they've done, and what Keir Starmer said in the NFU in February, was how he was going to protect the family farm and how the Conservatives had been running us to the ground. And he gets his first budget, and what does he do? Drops the worst bombshell ever. Well, there's 3 bombshells. Number 1 is inheritance tax. Number 2 is the tax on double pickups, which are the majority of farmers need them as in a family car and a work vehicle. And then
they're not a luxury.
Yeah, well, they're going to tax as well the fertiliser that comes into this country. So they're 3 hits that are going to hit the farming community, the family farms, and it's going to hit the general public. And
that's it. Everything, eventually, it will move through to our supermarket shelves. There seems to be a lot of public support for farmers. I mean, certainly we here at Talk very supportive of you. Obviously, is it important that that support is kept and that protests are kept? You know, you could protest outside Westminster, you want to, lobby MPs, but the crucial thing is they have to stay legal to keep that public support.
When we drove through Llandudno on Saturday, people were coming out of hairdressers, fish and chip shops. They were waving, they were bipping their horns, they were giving us, get out there, boys. We don't want to be out here protesting. I didn't want to stand there for 4.5 hours in the rain waiting for Mr. Starmer to come out and just say hello. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be home here producing food to feed people affordably. Every farmer came there for a reason. The general public were fantastic. The man himself didn't have the kahunas to come out and address us, which is a great shame because he had an opportunity. So he's not willing to stand in front of the people that are challenging.
That tells you everything,
policies.
Doesn't it? Gareth Wyn-Jones, I hope you'll come on the show again. You're a fantastic advocate for the cause. You explained it all so well. I know you'll be taking the tractor to London for that protest tomorrow. We'll be covering all of that. He's a cow and sheep farmer. Gareth Wyn-Jones, thank you so much. Quick word from Claire Pearsall.
We need to support the farmers. If we don't have farmers, we don't have food.
Absolutely. It really is that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about this a lot tomorrow as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on support for farmers. 0344 499 1000. Also, should Britain be cozying up to China? As Starmer is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit for a private meeting today. But why do we treat Vladimir Putin so differently from how we treat Xi Jinping? They're both murderous dictators who pose a threat to the West. So why does one get the red carpet and one gets sanctions. Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. More from Claire, more from me, plenty coming up. This is Talk.
on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 11. Great to have your company. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Also with me is Claire Pearsall, former Conservative government advisor, and lots and lots of your calls coming in. I promise we'll get to those, and lots of fantastic guests that are coming up, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. It is great to have your company as well. Coming from this hour, we are going to be talking more about the government and their plan for Georgia Maloney-style migrant deals with Vietnam, Iraq and Kurdistan, offering them financial incentives like we already do with France to curb migrant departures. How's that working out so far, folks? Also, the US President Joe Biden has finally given Ukraine, another country, Ukraine approval to use those US-supplied long-range missiles to strike targets within Russia. I'm asking you today about what Keir Starmer's up to. He's at the G20 summit in Brazil. By the way, his 15th trip abroad since July the 5th. I'm really worried about the environment. People shouldn't be flying so much. Climate change. 15th jetting abroad. So he's at the G20 summit in Brazil, and he's holding a private meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. I want to know, should Britain be cozying up to China? Tell us why they should. Tell us why we shouldn't. Realpolitik, we have to deal with him, but we deal with Xi Jinping so differently to how we deal with Vladimir Putin. But they're just as bad as each other. Murderous, tyrannical dictators, are they not? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to ring. You can text the word TALK and your message to 87222. You can message us on X at Talk TV. If you're still on X, lots of people leaving for Blue Sky. apparently because they're a bit cross because Elon Musk supports someone they don't support, and therefore it must be a bad place. Because they don't really cope very well with people disagreeing with them. Poor little diddumsy things. But you can also leave a message on YouTube and on your if you're watching on YouTube, have a look at that. Now, also going to be talking about. I mean, this story is extraordinary. A paedophile convicted of sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. He's from Democratic Republic of Congo. He's been allowed to remain in the UK thanks to the European Convention on Human Rights, because apparently deporting him would breach his right to a family life. I mean, I'd say you couldn't make this stuff up, but it does always sound like it's made. These are the sort of stories it sounds like someone made up, except there are these stories virtually every week. Also, this blows my mind. Young people are going to have their benefits docked if they don't take up training or apprenticeship offers or, I don't know, get a job under back-to-work plans to be announced this month by the Labour Party. How on earth is this not already happening? It should be a basic... I mean, this is so basic, is it not? Anyway, we're going to talk about all of that here at Talk. Claire Pearsall, as I say, is with us. Fascinating to talk to the farmer we just spoke to.
Yeah.
Politics today... News today is very much, there's an awful lot of stuff, very much at home. We're talking about, freedom of speech, police turning up, with outside journalists' doorsteps, question them about tweets and things. Two-tier policing, failing to see a prosecution of those two brothers who, on video, are quite clearly seen assaulting 3 police officers, including a woman PC being punched repeatedly in the face at Manchester Airport in July. Reform UK doing a private prosecution of that. They've got the funding for it. CPS, for some reason, not getting on with the job. But yeah, let's make sure that 16-year-olds are sent to, behind bars in youth detention centres for posting something on TikTok or YouTube about the Southport riots. We live in a mad world at home. We've got the farmers, a big protest happening tomorrow. We've got the problems with migration. We've got all of this going on, and yet so much focus is what's going on overseas, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's the G20 summit, and what's the threat from China, the threat from Russia to not just Ukraine but to us as well. Prime ministers who jet around love doing that, don't they? Because the red carpet's rolled out. Keir Starmer on his 15th trip abroad since he's become Prime Minister. They love doing this, don't they? All prime ministers of all political hues get a big kick out of being on the world stage, being, jetting in and red carpet and all of that. Do they ever achieve anything at any of these meetings?
I don't think they really do, and I think some of it is soft power. I think the G20 is really important. COP, not so much. Don't know why we had to send 470 delegates to a climate conference.
Yes, if you've not seen this, this isn't 470 Brits. This is the government.
Exactly. So, as much as you want to cut down on your emissions, and Ed Miliband wants to put a windmill up on every green piece of land there is, they're quite happy to jet across to something that's going to make absolutely no difference whatsoever. Yeah. So I think that G20, there's a real place for that, and it is the only time that you can really get round a table and speak. But any time you go away with a minister abroad, which I've done, you end up spending a lot of time transporting between different places and get very little achieved in between.
A lot of it's done by officials beforehand, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was it this private meeting that Keir Starmer's having, a one-on-one private meeting with President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Brazil? Should Britain be cozying up to China is the question we're asking. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. So we'll get to calls very quickly on that. But should we be, or is that just a necessary evil? You have to deal with these people, you haven't got a choice.
I think you have to deal with them. You don't have to like another world leader, but you are on the same stage and you have to have a relationship. And there are interesting points that he could raise: Uyghurs, Hong Kong nationals, human rights abuse, murder, COVID, as you've mentioned previously. Why not have those kind of conversations? But do we think that Keir Starmer is really going to go there and put all those issues on the table?
Well, that's it. You're having a meeting with him because basically we are completely economically in hock to China. I mean, they're providing pretty much everything in terms of our investments, funding for universities. Huge number of Chinese students funding our university system. Huge amount of investment, and they're providing pretty much every good we purchase. And of course, with this push for the insane 2030 clean electricity plan from Ed Miliband and others, supplying all our solar panels and wind turbines, and they have, of course, cornered the market in all the rare earth metals because no one in the West thought that was something that they should try and stop and deal with China. We are going to wake up to the threat of China at some point in the next few years, and that is going to be a very, very, very scary moment.
And it's too late. I mean, you were talking earlier about China have been planning things for 40 years or so. Well, a friend of mine, Bruce, has just pointed out to me that they also have been got land on lease in Ukraine, and they've also bought up land in Australia and places like New Zealand. So you can kind of see where this is going.
They bought up half of London, along with the Middle East. They bought up half of London.
And I worry for our farmland, should farmers have to sell because they can't afford this.
I worry they bought up our politicians. I'm genuinely serious. I find it extraordinary that we've got sanctions from China on Tory MPs, Ian Duncan-Smith, Tom Tugendhat and others. We've got massive cyber hacking, massive spying issues. I mean, off the scale. And the treatment of the people in Hong Kong, who, by the way, Britain has still got a duty of care towards. The treatment of the Uyghurs. You know, Keir Starmer's supposed to be a human rights lawyer. That'll be barely mentioned. I mean, they'll mention it because they have to go through that. But I mean, I think we are in some very difficult circumstances, and I still want to know when I'm getting my reparations for 2 years of my life being stolen away from me with the lockdowns and all the madness as a result of the COVID pandemic, which the Chinese created in a lab in Wuhan. Yes, they did, and then covered up, and as a result, it spread around the world. I mean, I'm sorry, but I want my reparations, please.
Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? To keep us all indoors, shut down an economy for something.
I still blame my government for their reaction, but nevertheless,
that's a different conversation.
But why is no one talking about this COVID reparations?
Well, they're too scared, aren't they? It's very easy to look at reparations if it's the British having to wring their hands and pretend they're sorry about something.
Yeah, I guess they're the wrong colour. You have to be white, don't you? It's just quite bizarre, isn't it? Let's go to a couple of calls on this because I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch 0344 499 1000. Bob is on the line. He's in Lancashire. Hello, Bob.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Oh, good late night for Bob on a Sunday night. I love that. I do that all the time. Bob, what do you want to say?
Well, you've covered that many subjects there before.
I know.
But if you just think about how long the farmers have been thinking things in succession, how long it's been planning to be able to calm the farms down, and I think Starmer should be over here listening to the farmers. On Saturday, he sneaked out the back door at London, and Gareth Wynne-Jones was very annoyed about that, and I think he should make some time tomorrow to come and speak to us. A lot of the Labour seats in the countryside have been gained by Labour politicians and MPs. And I tried talking to my MP after it took me 6 months. Well, ever since he's been elected, I only managed to speak to him last Thursday, and he's not interested.
And you're a farmer yourself?
Yes, I do farm, but also I deal in machinery and equipment, and it's going to have a massive knock-on effect. There's 6 machinery dealers gone bust in the last 2 or 3 months, and one chapter unfortunately committed suicide, which is very sad. And it's going to have a knock-on effect to the auction marts, the produce, wagons catching all the stuff. And I tried to explain what I think is going to happen. I think people's going to keep not growing crops, they'll be growing, for argument's sake, wild bird seed and flowers and different things on the land, and just claiming and not bother growing anything. And it's going to demoralise all the country all the way down the line, right from the top to the bottom.
And people just don't realise it. And again, I think a lot of Labour, like a lot of us in the media, like me, we're townies. We don't understand the root of the food all the way to our plates. So as you're concerned, basically, he needs to be back here dealing with domestic issues, priorities like that, and not on the world stage jetting around.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I've covered it every time. Well, thanks for letting me get on this show and talk to you. Thank you very much, you.
No, really. Sorry, that line went a bit funny. Really appreciate your call, Bob. Thank you very much. To see you at the protest tomorrow, no doubt. Just some news in the last 10 minutes or so. Christopher Bell, aged 45, has pleaded guilty at Newcastle Crown Court to being the owner of a dangerously out-of-control XL bully dog, which killed his neighbour Ian Langley in Shiny Row near Sunderland last October. One of those many, many cases where we see out-of-control XL bully dogs and similar dogs attacking people. I think people are absolutely stark, staring insane to have these dogs anywhere. And it's one thing, when they got them in, we've seen a baby attacked recently, this type of dog. Again, it's never a Labrador, is it? It's never a collie or a Labrador. Whenever there's one of these stories, babies, children being mauled, grown men being mauled to death, you cannot fight these animals off. whenever you see these stories and your heart goes out to them, but you look at the people and go, what were you thinking? Because it's never a chihuahua or a poodle either. You know exactly which of 2 or 3 dogs is it going to be. Why would you have these things in your house? Why are we allowing these animals anywhere in this country? You may as well have a sodding wolf in your house, for God's sake. But it just makes me so angry that we don't... You can deal with this. You can deal with it like that. I'm sorry. And I love dogs. And I completely get that. It's the problem is often the owner, not the dog, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day...
It's not going to stop
yeah. But if your crocodile kills someone, everyone understands why, don't they? I mean, you know what I mean? This is not complicated stuff. It really isn't. But there we are. Let it go. I won't let it go. Let's talk back about Ukraine, though. Front page of a lot of the papers today. Joe Biden authorising Ukraine to use long-range missiles inside Russia. We've got... we know that Starmer, following on from Tory Prime Ministers repeatedly, and, of course, Macron of France, also very keen to allow Ukraine to use their long-range weaponry, these Storm Shadow missiles. But they involve an American... sort of radar or a system that they've got a veto, so America has to agree for us to be able to give allow our weapons to be used long range, where they could actually strike in the heart of Russia. Do you think Donald Trump Jr., as ghastly as he is, little mini me, is right that actually Biden's trying to start World War III before the new president goes into office in January?
Normally I dismiss anything that Junior says. However,
as does his dad, I think.
However, I think he might have a little bit of a point. Really interesting timing. Biden could have done this way before the election.
Yeah, but that's because he knew perfectly well that would not have gone down very well.
But this feels very much... this is a setup for Donald Trump. Now, I don't know if Biden has the capacity to think like that or if it's just a coincidence that it's happened now. But we need to have the conversation. We need to look at what Ukraine needs from the US and from us in Europe. And if it's brought that conversation forward, then that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is something, isn't it? Can I also just talk to you about this Congolese paedophile? I mean, it's... Again, you laugh the same way I do. How can we find... But it is absolutely mind-blowing that a man from the Democratic Republic of Congo... So whenever it's called a democratic country, it's always the bad one that's not... If you've got the word democratic in your name of your country, never is, like Democratic Republic of Germany wasn't the democratic one. If you always feel... if you feel the need to say it out loud, isn't. But he came to this country, he sexually assaults his stepdaughter and 2 other children. He's got 3 kids of his own who he's not been accused of sexually assaulting. He served 3 years behind bars. We're talking about the most vicious, awful, horrific sexual abuse of minors. He's been convicted. Why he only served 3 years? Again, another madness of our so-called justice system. And then he's going to be deported, because if you get charged with these crimes, you're supposed to be deported. But under European Convention on Human Rights, he has a right to a family life, and his wife and children are here. And so he's won an appeal at a tribunal to not be deported back to Congo. Yeah. Because I'm saying this out loud, and I'm thinking this is the sort of thing that you would expect to be sort of a satirical, sort of a dystopian future. We can't deport foreign paedophiles from our country. What the beep, 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 beep is going on?
What is also interesting is the use of his right to a family life. Well, the children that he abused, where are those rights?
But also, he didn't have a right to a family life when he was in prison.
No, he didn't. And the courts don't need to use that as in its whole, because there is a clause within the ECHR document about right to a family life, which says unless it goes against the public good and public safety, or words to that effect. I can't remember it entirely.
There's virtually those words. Yeah.
So that could have been used again, and
was designed to be used. But this is it. It's not necessarily what's in the legislation. Like, it hasn't always been a problem. No, because it's how activists, judges interpret it. I mean, that's the issue we've got with everything we're dealing with illegal migrants, with appeals of this sort.
Yeah, and it does need to go and be appealed. This person needs to leave the country, I would quite happily put him on a plane myself and send him back whence he came.
No, but there'll be a bunch of liberal bleeding hearters to be on the same EasyJet flight.
Should the pair of us...
I don't know if EasyJet fly to Congo. Probably.
A-Jet.
Probably. But, going, oh no, he looks really nice.
Do you think
I think we should keep him here because he doesn't want to leave and he's in handcuffs.
Do you think if you and I turned up, though, they would have any truck with us? Because I think between the pair of us, we could get him on that plane and get rid of the lefties at the same time.
I absolutely think that you and I could sort that out. Your husband any moment now is going to message you going, you two are scaring me again.
It.
But I'm pretty sure... I think I would love to know how many of the bleeding hearters who really do think we should have open borders and that, come in, the water's lovely, everyone should stay, nonsense. How many of them think that a man from the Democratic Republic of Congo who has come here, who has sexually abused children, who's served time, who's convicted, should be allowed to stay here? I mean, hey, by the way, he can have his family life. He can just have it in the country he comes from.
Absolutely. Would all of these lefties that are wringing their hands, would they like him to live next door to them and their
Absolutely.
children?
Why don't you let him babysit your kids? That's always... If you're so happy about this guy staying in this country, let him live next door to you, bring him over and let him babysit your kids. Come on, then. You feel so strongly about it. Why don't you just put your money, put your children's safety where your words are? Why don't you? And actually, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Let him look after your kids and tell us how safe he is to be in this country. And he's going to be here because of lunatics. Our judicial system is tribunal system, it is so deeply damaged. And this is why I was supporting the election of Donald Trump, because I want a little bit of that action here. We need a disruptor. We need someone who's not scared of being not liked by the Guardian and the BBC and the chattering classes, who doesn't care about dinner parties in Islington and will do the stuff that is necessary to restore proper criminal justice system in this country, proper values, and restore, what British people want. And genuinely, if you really are insane enough to think this man has a right to stay in this country, how on earth have you got a role in our tribunal or judiciary system?
But also, such a short prison sentence as well. 3 years doesn't go anywhere near punishment for the crime that he committed.
People have been given longer than that for writing stuff on Facebook in the last few months.
Yeah. Kids filming things on TikTok and other platforms, they're getting arrested at the age of 16 and going away for 18 months.
I think we need a complete overhaul of this.
I think we do. I think it is absolutely right for looking at the sentencing guidelines.
Absolutely. Look, I want to get to more of your calls, so much more to talk about. One thing we haven't got to yet is Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor. Apparently... her CV's been, should we say, padded out a little. I wonder how long she gets to stay in her job. Because I'm of the view that if you lie on your CV about if you lie on your CV, should you be allowed to stay in your job? Didn't you get it under false pretences? I mean...
It's quite a big lie as well. It's not even
about whether she was an economist or not an economist at Halifax or not. Yeah.
I mean, normally that's not kind of the thing that you would forget.
I'm pretty sure I know what my job was at every single job, whether it was stuffing envelopes, whether it was working in a burger takeaway, which I actually did do. Hi, Kamala Harris. But I can remember it. I mean, God, you can remember these. You might not... Oh, God, what year? What was it? I mean, when you get to my age, was it 2004 or was it 20... I mean, I have no idea.
But you remember the job that you had.
And other people might remember you. And isn't it funny? A lot of the jobs she claims she did, no one can seem to quite remember...
No, seem to sort of
become Chancellor of the country under false pretences. I mean, I'm just wondering, I'm just thinking, you or me, we'd probably be facing the sack for that, wouldn't we? By the way, if anyone is asking here, I never claimed to have passed my 100 words per minute shorthand test. I said I had done 100 words per minute shorthand, which I did once.
It's a bit like my 60 words a minute touch typing.
Have you got... Yeah, we've all got that.
I did do it.
Wink, wink, everybody. Get the police. 11:23 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to get to more of your calls coming in about China, about farming, about Putin, you name it, Ukraine. You give us a call. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number. This is Talk.
House raiders struck Windsor Castle Estate as the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children slept in their home nearby. Now, they basically crashed through a barrier. There was no armed guards on the gate because guess why? The armed guards have been removed, partly because they couldn't find anybody to do it, apparently, but also partly because tourists, allegedly, according to the people that run Windsor, didn't like seeing police officers walking around with machine guns.
It's either that, or I don't like to see an armed police officer. Well, it's an area of high security. I actually find it quite reassuring.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:27 is the time. Claire Pearsall still with me. Let's get to some more of your texts and calls and messages coming in thick and fast about a lot of the subjects we're talking about today. China, Putin, Ukraine, farming, you name it. Welcome to put a message in and send put a call in on any of the big topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. But let's get some of your texts and messages about Britain cozying up to China. Should we be? Because Keir Starmer's meeting Xi Jinping today in Brazil. Diane says we already are buying solar and wind farms from them. What next? Billy says easy answer. Yes, it would be good for the economy. Yeah, this is my thing. I think we just sell out our values, our security, our safety, just for cheap goods and cheap investment. And I just think, yeah, why are they doing that? I mean, to be fair, China's economy is reliant on the West as the West is reliant on China. I mean, you know, their economy collapses. And by the way, so does their political system.
Yes.
If we stop buying their goods. But, you know, Richard says, absolutely not. We shouldn't be cozying up to them. China is a communist dictatorship. It boggles my mind that so-called democratic nations are happy to work with such a country at the expense of the Chinese and Uyghur people. Also at the expense of British jobs and manufacturing. Chinese steel is the reason Britain has no steel industry anymore. I mean, Richard nailed it. Jessica says, have they reimbursed us for COVID? If the answer is no, then don't cozy up to them. Exactly. Let's go to Elliot, who's on the line. He's in Bushy. And Elliot, you want to talk about Putin and Ukraine, don't you?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you just fine, yes, my darling.
Okay. The show's brilliant. I listen to it every day. No, the show is brilliant. So refreshing to listen to people that talk sense. Look, we have... just give me a minute or two. I know you've got a lot of callers. This is very serious. Of course we want to stop the war. People are getting killed. It's terrible. That, unfortunately, is what happens in wars. But I'll tell you this. We're either on the side of our deep values, the way we live, the way Ukraine, I believe, adopts similar, if not the same values. And we want to stop killing, but are we not also want to support those countries that support democracy, freedom, our way of life, our way of thinking, rather than simply cave in? We gave Crimea away. No one does a thing. If we negotiate with Putin and let him get the advantage, what does it mean when China goes into Taiwan? And they will. Look what China have done in Hong Kong. What does it mean for the Baltic states with Russia? What does it mean for Poland? We're either on the side of what we believe in or we're not. Our society and our way of life and our Judeo-Christian values may not be perfect. Of course it's not. But you know what? Until someone tells me and everyone else there's something better out there, I'll stick up for what we believe in and what we believe is right. And that's what we're fighting for here. It's not just a matter of territory. It's not just a matter of stopping people getting killed. Of course, that's what happens. That's terrible. But we've got to decide what sort of future we want. And I'm afraid that we in the West are terribly weak. We are feeble. We are weak. We don't stand up for our own values. And the indictment is because our awful, rotten leaders, whether they're spiritual, economic, political, or social, I'm afraid, Julia, they don't genuinely believe in our cultural heritage and our democracy and way of life in the West, and that's terrible. They pretend and purport to believe like Starmer, but they don't.
They don't really value it. I can't tell you how well you have nailed it, Elliot. I can imagine people right now are cheering you on. Round of applause. I mean, you've absolutely nailed it. We need some people like you in government giving good advice to people. Elliot, thank you so much for that absolutely superb call. Guys, just saying, the bar's pretty high today. Just warning you on that one. Claire, I don't know if we're going to say anything that sensible.
No, I think Elliot is spot on.
Every single
Absolutely every word. Yeah, and that's what we need, people like that to come into politics.
It's existential.
Yeah.
People think it's just, it's a bit territory, it's not our problem, we don't want to be at war. Yeah. It's an existential battle. Same as in the Middle East with Israel.
Yeah.
It's an existential battle. Islamofascism or murderous dictators, whoever they are, you need to be willing to stand up for Western civilization values. And I'm sorry, yes, I'm sending other people's sons to war. Well, I'm sorry, sometimes there have to be wars. Sometimes they do. We don't start them, usually. Yeah. We'd like not to have them, but you need to be willing and able to fight to defend your values. Yeah, otherwise, you don't have any values. It's really that simple. Let's go back to the phone lines. Anne is on the line. She's in Sussex. Good morning to you, Anne. How are you?
To both of you. I'm okay. I was ringing about the farmers, but I have to say, on this situation with China and Russia, in 1970, my neighbours came back from Zambia, and they told me how the Chinese were investing so heavily there because they were buying into all the assets that are underground in Africa way back then. And who gave all the technology to China? This nation, very much so. We wouldn't develop what the inventors invented. Yeah. And the Chinese picked it up.
Yeah, well, also, they cyber hack. I mean, the cyber hacking on firms is they don't really come up with any ideas. They just steal everything, don't they? But as you say, I mean, they've been this Belt and Road policy. Now it's sort of officially called that. They've been doing this for years. Tell us what you wanted to. What did you want to say about farmers?
About the farming. Where I live in Mid Sussex, when I came here, there were farms, lots and lots of small farms. We had a farmers' market. They were producing. And, of course, after the war, we were self-sufficient and we grew everything. And if we lose these small farmers, not just the big ones, it's the small farmers who are the ones who are going to be hit, the smaller farmers, we will have to be importing again with all the problems that would bring and dependent on other countries to provide.
Yeah, to provide our basics. And we saw, didn't we, with COVID and lockdowns, and we saw with the Ukraine invasion, when suddenly you couldn't get the fertiliser, the sunflower oil, the wheat. I mean, that was crucial for large parts of the world. That we are very interdependent. But yes, we're going to often have that dependence, but we also need to know that we can manage if and when we can manage on our own.
Well, we're not going to with this government, I'm sorry.
We are not. You're quite right on this, although, frankly, I wasn't that impressed with the last one either. But there we are. Anne in Sussex, thank you as always. Lovely to hear from you. I'm going to take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking about this new government plan, the latest wheeze to tackle the Channel migrant crossings. This Giorgia Meloni-style, Italian-style plan to basically try and, pay some of the countries where people are coming from to beef up their border security and stop people coming. But is that going to work? And why on earth is a Congolese paedophile allowed to stay in this country? Because he's got a right to a family life here. We'll talk about all of that with immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson. I'm also going to be talking in the next half hour about young people in Britain on benefits apparently going to have their benefits withdrawn if they don't either get a job, go up to go on a training course or an apprenticeship. But why on earth was that not already the case? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:38. It's time to keep those calls, amazing calls today, coming in. Thank you so much. 0344 499 1000 is the number. I have a funny feeling you might want to have your say about what we're talking about next. Claire Pearsall's a former Conservative government advisor, and you and I, even though you worked in the Home Office, we're just as dumbfounded about this as we possibly can. Two stories here I want to talk to immigration lawyer Ivan Sampson about. Good morning to you, Ivan.
Good morning, Julia.
First of all, this is the latest government wheeze of how we're going to tackle illegal migration. And it basically, I suppose it's an extension, really, from what we're trying to do with France, giving them, £500 million or whatever it is. Please, can you police your borders, stop people coming here? But also then going back to the Iraq, Kurdistan, Vietnam and other countries and basically saying, we're going to give you money. Can you beef up your border to stop people leaving those countries in the first place? First of all, do you think this will work? And second of all, do you think there are other countries we should be doing this to or with?
I think it's wishful thinking on part of the government, to be honest. If you look at the £480 million we handed over to the French with absolutely no performance targets at all, we have no idea what they've done with that money. And then we're expected to give it to countries. This is a Western nation, and we're expected to give it to countries who don't have a sophisticated government system, who don't have good systems of governance, and hand our taxpayers' monies to them, and hoping, please, would you stop people leaving your country? I don't think that's going to.
Do you think they would do it if Keir Starmer or Yvette Cooper, the new Home Secretary, said, pretty please, with honey on top? Do you think if they asked in a nicer way they might do it? Because they seem to be absolutely convinced, these two, that in any issue related to migration, the real issue is you just need to get round a table and you need to be nice to people. So if they said, pretty please, do you think the Iraqis or the Vietnamese would stop people leaving their countries?
If it wasn't such a... I mean, it's funny, but you know what? This is so serious.
Yeah.
Because we do not have a control of our borders. People are coming into our country.
I'm glad you noticed, by the way.
Without our consent, and we have no idea. And it's not just people claiming asylum, Julia. Yeah. There are many people who don't claim asylum, who just simply come across and disappear into the black economy. Yep. Estimates are about 1 million people, and we forget about them. I mean, what is the government doing about them? They're the people that are here illegally, close to 1 million people who are undocumented in this country. And it's, I think, if you listen to Yvette Cooper, while they were in opposition, Labour in opposition, her ideas then were, have safe legal routes. Yeah. That was the mantra they had against the Rwanda deal, the Rwanda policy the government had of the time. And they've forgotten all that.
Well, but also that wouldn't work anyway. I've never understood why people... I mean, yes, people said they shouldn't come here illegally, they should come legally. And then it was pointed out that actually there's only a few countries from which people can apply to arrive here legally, Ukraine and elsewhere, Hong Kong. And actually, for most people, there isn't an option of applying until you actually get to our shores. That's where you have to literally put your foot onto the beach at Dover before you can actually apply. But the reality is, a lot of these young men, and 90% of them are young men without passports, a lot of them, frankly, wouldn't be able to stay here. They wouldn't be front of the queue for asylum. And so they would have to come through the illegal routes anyway. You know that, I know that. That isn't even a solution.
No, it won't stop those who are not genuine asylum seekers. I agree with you.
Which is most of them. They're economic migrants.
About half. Look, we need
Well, we don't really know because we haven't got their passports, to be fair.
Yes.
But a bit of a giveaway is when someone decides to turn up without a passport. It's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? Why do they not have their ID, which would prove that they are a genuine asylum seeker because of the country they've come from?
Well, we know they're genuine because 50% of them are deemed by the Home Office to be genuine.
No, that doesn't mean they're genuine. We have a much higher approval rating for asylum seekers than does most of Europe. A lot of these people have actually already been told no thank you from other European countries. But also, a lot of these people aren't granted asylum when these things go to appeal. They are granted leave to stay. They're not necessarily granted asylum. And that's just the ones that go through. And those will be the ones, a tiny proportion of them, those will be the more obvious ones. The many tens and tens of thousands of others haven't even been assessed yet.
Yes, and a lot of them are granted humanitarian protection. But look, we need to remove those people who have not been granted asylum. This is the problem. The problem is, once you get here and suppose that you are refused asylum, I'm afraid we're stuck with them. Because we don't have returns policies.
But otherwise, but we do with a few countries. But the point is, but why are we stuck with them? Other countries don't seem to have an issue with this in Europe. They just ship them out.
Yes, I know. But are you suggesting that we follow the lead of countries like Italy, who literally push them across the border?
Yes.
Are you suggesting we do that?
Yes, 100%.
Well, that's fine. And what you need to do is vote for a party that takes us out the Refugee Convention.
Yes.
Takes us out of UNCLOS, which is the Convention on Laws of the Sea, and takes us out of the European Convention on Human Rights. And what you'll be
all in favour
will be you'd be on the same side as people like Putin and Belarus.
People always cite this. You know what? We managed to actually have human rights in this country before we had all these. We gave a lot of those human rights and values to Europe. I don't think we need a lecture from Europe on how to have a proper human rights in this country. Can I ask you? I would say we've gone rather too far. Just want to ask you before you go about this other big story. And this is a paedophile who came from the Democratic Republic of Congo, living here. He's in his early 50s. He was jailed for 3 years in 2020 for what were described as appalling offences, including sex abuse of children, one involving his stepdaughter, 2 other girls in the family. He has been granted appeal, won his appeal at a tribunal to be allowed to stay here. So he's a convicted sex offender. He's not going to be sent back from Scotland to the Democratic Republic of Congo because the tribunal ruled that he does have a human right to a family life. And he, his wife and his 3 children that he did not abuse have a right to live here under that rights. Now, if we are not able to deport a man who has been convicted of horrific sex crimes against children, how on earth he's out after 3 years, good Lord, what the hell is going on in this country, is a shocker. But if we can't deport a convicted paedophile, then all hope is gone, isn't it, under these human rights legislations?
Well, I'm going to tell you about the law. And Article 8, right to family and private life, is a composite right. It's not the right of... If this individual wasn't married and didn't have children, he'd be out. And we've got
what
very
difference
strong
should it make,
law.
then? What difference should it make?
The difference is that what the courts will look at is, would it be unduly harsh for his children, British nationals, perhaps,
perhaps, not necessarily. Well, wait a minute. In that case, you wouldn't send anyone to prison ever. You wouldn't send him to prison because he didn't have a family life while he was in prison. His family can go with him to Congo.
Well, to be fair, he's paid his price to society for going to prison.
Well, he hasn't. I don't think 3 years behind bars is a price to society for sexually abuse.
But again, it boils down to the convention. If we don't like it, let's come out of it.
Ta-da!
If people don't like it, vote for a party that will bring us out. But we can't complain about the law.
No, we do, but we can, because it's not what's written in Article 8. It's about the interpretation. You know, and a lot of these rights to privacy, family life and all of that, they do have a proviso. There's, in the next sentence, it says, unless there is a threat to, security or, or other people or whatever. There are clauses in it. They're just being willy-nilly ignored by these tribunal judges and by magistrates and by everybody else and the Home Office repeatedly. The interpretation of these rights is just a complete bleeding heart lefty interpretation, as opposed to balancing the right of someone to, you've got a right to a family life, apart from when you sexually abuse children in our country, we want you out. And then you don't have a right to a family life because you have thrown away that right. Off you toddle, take your family with you, ta-da.
The threshold, the reality, Julia, in the courts, the threshold is very high.
Well, it's clearly
the courts do not. No, I disagree with you. I've been to enough tribunal cases.
Here's the story.
No, I know, but we don't know all the facts. The judges
I think we know enough of the facts. What would be a fact that would make it? Well, he should be able to stay here with his family. What fact could there be? He can't be named, by the way, because we're protecting his children.
If he had a child who was more than 7 years old and settled in the UK, then under the immigration rules, that would be unduly harsh for that child to go to Democratic Republic.
Well, this child is welcome to stay here.
On that basis alone, he'd win.
Well, maybe he should, if he really cared about his kids, maybe he should have thought about that before he sexually abused his stepdaughter and 2 other kids. I don't give 2 hoots about that. The fact that anyone can even justify this blows my mind. Ivan Sampson, always a pleasure to have you on, but God, my head is spinning today. Anyone else? 11:48 is time. I'll get Claire's thoughts on that in a moment. We're also going to be talking about why young people are finally, we told, it's never going to actually happen, are going to have their benefits docked if they don't take up training or apprenticeships as part of a back-to-work scheme. Never going to happen, folks. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
are considering material and are providing advice in relation to a series of alleged criminal offences at Manchester Airport in July this year. That's the same statement they've been giving us since it happened.
Let's just remind everybody, this was July the 23rd.
Yes.
Right?
We're just watching it now.
It is now November the 18th.
Yeah.
Almost 4 months later.
Yeah.
And with the greatest of respect to the Crown Prosecution Service, why is it taking so long? What are they faffing around at?
Right.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist.
It really doesn't.
To see what's happened there, take some witness statements and make a decision.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for your company. 11:52 is the time. Claire Pearsall still with me. Let's just ask you just very briefly, Claire, just your reaction to what Ivan Sampson had to say in terms of that migration story and the paedophile in particular. She's smirking. This is the only way to respond. But...
You know when you look at somebody and just think, how are you ever saying these words. This person should be out of the country. Their feet shouldn't touch the ground. They should be on a plane. They should go.
I'll sort the tribunals.
Can you defend it?
I'll sort this one out. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Our country is mad. We are absolutely start-stone. Well, the people in charge are mad, and I think the British people is going, we've had enough. We're heading for Trump territory, because if the main parties won't do sane stuff, we're going to find someone who will. It's as simple as that. Let's talk right now about something which is sane, but again, how is this not already being the law? Young people who are going to have their benefits docked if they don't take up training or apprenticeship offers under a new back-to-work scheme to be announced later this month as part of a youth guarantee. Councils and mayors are going to seek out hundreds of thousands of people aged 18 to 21 who are unemployed or off sick. An awful lot of young people now claiming to be off sick, to offer them help finding a job or training. Ministers say they will not be allowed to remain outside the workforce. So the Work and Pension Secretary Liz Kendall says she's going to publish a 3-point plan to get people back to work. Well, let's talk about this with Justin Urquhart-Stewart. He's an economist and also the chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. I mean, this sounds great. I mean, God, I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember, YTS. Hold on a second. What are you holding? Sorry, if you're watching on YouTube, you've got a cat. That was very sort of James... Well, you're holding it over your shoulder for those who aren't watching on YouTube. It's very sort of James Bond baddie in his red braces holding a large cat. Very disconcerting as I looked up and read.
Yes,
anyway, I'm old enough and ugly enough and not cat holding enough to remember YTS, the YOP scheme, Youth Opportunity Programmes, and all the different schemes we've had over all the years to basically say you need to be either in school, in training or in a job. But we've got millions of young people who aren't working. Do you think this scheme will finally work?
No, as it is now, as you correctly say, we have lived through those statements of various governments year after year, and what's their reaction to it? Very little. Now, whatever your view, we go back in history to possibly someone called Norman Tibbett. Go down on your bike, you'll find a job, and everyone got upset about that. But actually, that was the case, and people did. Now, also, so actually putting some discipline into it, if you happen to still taking some benefits, then actually you should be expected to do something about it.
Yes.
Or you have the benefits taken away.
A bit of workfare. If you're a young person, a nice little bit of workfare wouldn't go amiss, would it?
As the positive side of that, actually, so making sure you're actually going in and doing something and not just spending your time in bed the entire time. Otherwise, you lose that whole attitude of work and the positive attitudes that will help your body and all sorts of things. The other bit, which is a threat, and your more chance to actually get a reaction, is it's not just your benefits, but unless you do something, some of your family's benefits are going to get affected. So to what extent does the father, the mother, brothers, sisters saying, oi, you're not doing anything, you're getting all of these things, and we're going to be penalised because of what you're not doing.
Yeah.
Now, that's the negative, but you can do so much on the positive side. For example, actually getting people back into work and giving them a modest incentive so that they stay in that job for a year, 18 months, 2 years, whatever it happens to be. They can actually prove how much they've actually been bringing in. There may be some form of reward at the end of it.
Well, yeah, no, wait a minute. The reward is getting paid.
Well, that's part of it, but if you also actually break the system in terms of, A, get them out because they're not there to penalise them, but then make sure they're getting in work and giving them it's carrot and stick, more stick.
Okay, but we've barely had any stick, and this is the thing that I don't understand. A, parents, do your job, your child should be working. I know an awful lot of middle-class parents, you go, oh, well, he's not doing any work at the moment. Well, I'm sorry. So, in 2 weeks' time, the locks are being changed if you can't pay rent. Go and get a job. I find it extraordinary. I mean, especially young people. Again, a lot of these young people, they haven't got many qualifications. Well, don't set your sights too high then. Be lucky to get some minimum wage work. I mean, it is extraordinary how many young people are out of work. And if you don't work when you leave school or leave uni, your chances of ever getting a job are pretty darn slim.
Now, what you can do, though, there are jobs that I have to say, some are getting pretty menial, labour jobs and things like that.
What's wrong with that? I've done plenty of those.
And I'm not showing off. I ended up working on a building site because I haven't got any money, because that's what you had to do. I can't go back to the family because they're not going to support me, quite likely. But it makes sure you're taking responsibility for it. Yeah. Put that responsibility back into society, and if they're not going to help, then I'm afraid the bigger family is going to actually suffer as well. So nothing like having your grandfather saying, you are lazy toe rag, get on with it, is going to have a far more effect than that she's just losing some benefit, but you'll still get something.
But again, this is one of my things, though. It's like, often it's like the doc benefit, so you lose a tenner a week or whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're probably still living, you've got a housing benefit, costing hundreds of pounds. It should be really, really simple. You're leaving school. Have you got a job? No. Well, Good luck with that. But your family are going to be having to spread their, because it's largely often families who are also claiming a lot of benefits. They're going to have to be funding you, or you're going to starve, because there are still plenty of jobs, especially at that menial level. And I wasn't too good for them, and you weren't too good for them. I'm guessing Claire wasn't too good. My audience would have been too good for them. I would sweep the streets. I've cleaned toilets. I've chopped chopped onions in a burger takeaway. I don't think any job is beneath anybody.
I don't think so. I wasn't much good, I have to say, on Southampton docks, and I do, sorry to say how pompous, I had to change my name as well, because Justin doesn't go down quite so well for a name.
Or the Urquhart Stewart. Can I ask, though, has your cat ever done any meaningful work, or does it just sit around showing its bottom to the camera?
As yet, nothing at all. Much more interested in actually turning around showing a bottom to whoever happens to come through. But I can't actually put her out to work yet. I thought a treadmill might help, because that might improve possibly the wind power that we're getting through. But not even that, I'm afraid.
Can I ask you just finally also, Rachel Reeves, some question marks have been raised by various souls, including the Guido Fawkes website and others, about Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and her CV. Quite a lot of pressure about whether or not her CV is actually... got a few false claims on it, and labelling her to win her seat as an MP, and of course the claims about she was a Bank of England economist that helped her party win power back in July, but she basically had claimed she was an economist on her CV at Halifax Bank of Scotland, HBOS, and using the experience to back up a claim she had economic expertise, but it turns out that she worked in retail banking at Halifax, and no one can remember her working as an economist. She was a mid-ranking person in a support department covering admin and IT. There seem to be some other questions about her exaggerating her time at the Bank of England as well. Should she be losing her job if she's lied on her CV?
Yes, lying is, I think, a fairly fundamental issue. If you lie, you go, unless you can actually persuade us otherwise. And a lovely phrase, involved in retail banking. That must be working on a till?
Well, exactly. I've been involved in retail banking. I've gone in and used their pens, writing a cheque. I've been involved in retail banking. But I mean, it was a big part of the shtick, wasn't it? She was a Bank of England economist. She'd had this oh, gosh, everyone would go, well, she knows what she's talking about. It doesn't turn out to stack up. Justin Urquhart Stewart, thank you to you and your very large, quite fat-looking cat, to be fair. Coming back in just a few moments. This is Talk at Home, sometimes of common sense.
on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
afternoon. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. No cats in this section of the show, as far as I'm aware, to date. Anyway, thank you very much indeed for joining me. And whether or not you are listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Fabulous also still to have former Conservative Government Advisor Claire Pearsall. No cat. No cat.
No.
Also,
At home.
well, if you were going to bring a pet in, it'd be a horse. She's very horsey.
But she'd love it. She'd be very helpful.
She's got all I know. My daughter got into horse riding. Well, it's my mum's fault. And I was the day she went, I don't want to do it anymore, I'm so happy.
I know. It's
They're
the best
horrible,
thing ever.
dangerous things.
Yes, it's half a ton of stupid.
Yeah,
but they're beautiful.
They're scared of crisp packets floating by,
Leaves,
for God's sake.
Squirrels.
Go on, get in touch with your horse riding. You're all mad. You're all bad. Anyway, we're going to talk more common sense. No cats, no horses, just us in the studio, and lots and lots more top guests to come. And whether you, whichever way you're listening or watching, we are on until 1 o'clock. Ian Collins in from 1 after to tell us what's happening on his show. Now, coming up, we are going to be talking about Keir Starmer telling police they should prioritise fighting crime that matters most to their communities, rather than spending public money on investigations involving hurt feelings. Yeah, does he really mean that? Because I'm not quite sure that was happening a lot of the time when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. Also, we keep being told, the government can't get involved with operational policing, but they always seem to change their tune on this, don't they? Also, and of course, we're going to be talking to Toby Young from the Free Speech Union over the Telegraph columnist, a very good friend of mine as well, Alison Pearson, being questioned by the police over a year-old tweet. Writer Julie Bindel also revealing she's had visits from the police, and many others as well. And of course, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump and what does his election mean for net zero madness, because he has just named his new energy secretary as Chris Wright, who, guess what, is an oil and gas industry executive who's on record as saying there is no climate crisis. So is there hope for sanity at long last? Plus, we're going to be talking about the latest woke madness as a mother of two is suing her former employer, that's Bracknell Forest Council, after they replaced single-sex toilets with gender-neutral loos at their offices. More action like this, everybody. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. As I say, welcome again to Claire Pearsall. Just an announcement in the last few moments from Reform UK. They've announced they have now officially launched their private prosecution into that incident at Manchester Airport back on July the 23rd. TMI, they're a leading private investigation and prosecutions company in the UK. They've been instructed formally by Reform UK to independently investigate the incident at Manchester Airport on the 23rd of July, bring forward a private criminal prosecution. Of course, this was when 3 police officers were under attack from 2 brothers. It's all caught on CCTV. One of the police officers was a woman PC who was smashed repeatedly in the face. One of the police officers is under investigation, along with another police officer, over his kicking and stamping one of the brothers on the ground, which is a video we first saw, although, of course, rather explained a little bit more by the longer video showing the two police officers originally trying to arrest these 2 brothers and then being set upon viciously. No prosecution forthcoming. Notice was given a few weeks ago by Reform UK that they wanted to bring a private prosecution. CPS has not acted at any time. The CPS has to do that, given that we've got footage of the incident. It is absolutely extraordinary that no charges have yet been brought. But Reform UK leader Nigel Farage says prosecutors have failed to act after an assault on police officers. So now we're going to do their job for them. Reform UK says refuses to allow 2-tier policing and 2-tier justice in Britain. Claire Pearsall, your reaction to that, first of all, before we go to our first guest?
Well, I think that we need to get some kind of conclusion to this case, because you've got police officers who have been injured in the line of duty, the CPS not moving very quickly.
Although 4 months apparently would be quite quick, but they were much quicker on the Southport riots, weren't they? Oh, straight there, within days.
Yeah, and you had decisions within weeks. Now, I don't see why you can't with this. Surely there has been enough evidence that they must have seen. Even if we haven't seen it, I am sure that the courts have seen it. So therefore that decision needs to come quickly.
We saw the video.
I'm sure that they've been given much more information than we have, and it's pretty damning from what we've seen.
Yeah, indeed. Funnily enough, it wasn't a racist attack, as was claimed by the lawyer, apparently after what the brothers had claimed. Luckily, it's not sub judice, because there aren't any criminal charges right now, so we can talk about it freely. There'll come a point where we can't, if and when it goes to trial, but there we are. Don't forget to get your messages coming in. Keir Starmer is going to hold a private meeting today with the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit in Rio today. I want to know, should Britain be cozying up to China? Tell us why they should. Tell us why we should. shouldn't, give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 87222. Send us a message at Talk TV on Twitter or X, whatever it's called this week. And don't forget, of course, the calls are charged at a national rate and text costs one standard network rate message. Right now, let's talk to Helen Fields. She's an author and criminal barrister and joins us now to talk about, well, two-tier justice. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. What possible reason could there be for there to have not been an announcement of charges by the Crown Prosecution Service against the two brothers who were on CCTV footage attacking 3 police officers trying to arrest them? What possible reason for this delay could there be?
I'm going to start off by saying I'm a former criminal barrister. I get in trouble if I don't say that, in line with lots of other red tape. But yes, the difficulty with bringing charges early or announcing charges early is simply that it takes an awfully long time in this country for the police to get the file together and to finalise that file with all their investigations. It's not as fast as we think, even with video. And then it goes to the CPS. I suspect here the hold-up is within the CPS. They're going to take a long time. Also, because this is really high profile, because it's hit the TV and the media, it's probably also been sent out to a barrister potentially to prosecute. So you've got the police, then you've got the CPS, then you've got barristers weighing in, and this stuff is going to take a little bit of time.
But again, well, it is extraordinary that we do see people charged so quickly over, say, the Southport riots. We're told, there has to be something, has action taken very quickly to nip things in the bud. But there could have been, and there were almost, disturbances over this after the initial claims from the brothers about the reasons why, one of them, the only footage we had, first of all, was of a police officer kicking and then stamping on the head of a man on the ground. And we had an awful lot of police officers serving and past saying how outrageous this was, and people demonstrating peacefully, it has to be said, outside the local police station. And then we saw the full footage, and we're showing it now if people are watching on our YouTube page, absolutely horrific attacks on the police officers, and it made not necessarily justifiable, the final kick, but absolutely more comprehensible and understandable why it happened. And yet we know that there's a prosecution investigation into the police officers, and there are 2 involved there. I think most of us simply can't understand what could possibly be holding up a prosecution. You look at the video, you interview the people involved, job done. I mean, I'm sorry, I could have that done and dusted within a week.
I completely agree that the sensible, answer to this is that it should be done. And it's not that it's impossible to be done. One of the things that's going to be holding this up is the Independent Office for Police Conduct, their investigation. So the CPS will be trying very hard to tie up all the loose ends so they can't be used in court or in procedures against the officers. So it's a very clean prosecution that stands a better chance of success. I think one of the things you're going to hear is that regarding the Southport riots is that, well, they were trying to nip that in the bud. Now, I personally don't accept that as an answer for why here they're not moving faster, because actually we also need to protect our police, make it very clear to members of the public that the police are not there to be used as punch bags. So the same message has to be sent out. I don't think that's an argument. I think it's bureaucracy and only bureaucry that's holding this up.
And we've had a man, I mean, he's sadly has died. We don't know the full circumstances. There is an inquest. But a man in his 60s, completely no criminal record whatsoever, shouting scum at the police very aggressively, but not actually taking part in any physical violence outside an asylum seeker hotel during those Southport riots. But he's kind of shouting scum at the police. So you get put in prison for shouting scum at the police, but no one's charged when you repeatedly punch of WPC in the nose, I mean, and attack. I mean, it is extraordinary to both of us. Can you just explain also the process of a private prosecution? I think a lot of people have understood for years, okay, the RSPCA can have private prosecutions of people who've abused animals and the like. They've taken that over. But I think most people are quite surprised to learn that there can be a private criminal, not civil prosecution. How does that work?
Yes, well, anyone can bring a private prosecution. They're very rare. So in the time when I was at the bar, I dealt with one, actually, because usually people don't have the money. I mean, it's largely about finances to get this stuff off the ground. It also still takes a long time, and it's quite a complicated procedure. And I should just say that whilst Reform UK and Nigel Farage can start this process, it is open to the Director of Public Prosecutions and the CPS to come in, take that over from them, and either to run it themselves or, in fact, to end it. So it's not quite as clean cut as them being able to bring a private prosecution, and it will definitely work. There's obviously some politicking here, quite understandably and quite rightly, to get things moving and to make the point. I do wonder if the CPS at some point, because Reform UK have quite rightly notified the CPS that they're doing this, don't have to, but they've done that. And I wonder if at some point in time there will be a meeting called where the CPS will say, right, we're now in a position to be able to go ahead. Yeah. We're going to press charges. You don't need to do this. I suspect that's what will happen.
Well, that's it. I think what Reform UK were perhaps hoping would happen. Can I just ask you about, the two-tiered policing? We're going to talk to Toby Young, Director of the Free Speech Union. So we've had, Alison Pearson, the Telegraph columnist, having the police turn up at her door. Been lots of toing and froing about what was actually said and what she's being investigated for. And we'll go through that with Toby. But in terms of, people facing prosecutions very quickly in Southport for text, for tweets and the like, but people not being prosecuted for violent crimes, the speed, the decision to prosecute at all, are we in a situation, for you as a former barrister, where we actually do have two-tier justice and two-tier policing?
I actually think that this is a phrase that's being used a lot. I think it's actually much worse than that. I think the criminal justice system is in complete disarray. And I think what it is at the moment is that our system is entirely reactive rather than being careful planning, rather than being proactive. There's not enough money. There's not enough courts. There aren't enough police or lawyers. So what's happening is that these situations are popping up. Sometimes there's really good reaction and sometimes there are fast prosecution. Other things go by the by. Then we're seeing a lot of confusion around things like online behaviour, alleged hate speech, the sort of things that's happening to Alison Pearson and that happened before to Julie Blindell, that, really muddy the boundaries of free speech. Anyone involved in the media at the moment, frankly, is a little bit concerned about what they can and can't say.
Well, it's not just the media. I mean, it's ordinary people. We often don't hear about those cases.
No, and it's really worrying. But I think the problem is, I think for Alison Pearson, she was quite possibly thrown into the limelight because she's also a journalist. Yeah. Even though that tweet was in some ways a slightly private view, I think. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is that they have this legislation that they're using against people. It doesn't have sufficient guidelines. The police haven't been trained properly. Nobody understands, even, legally speaking, really where the boundaries are between that and free speech. Yeah. And this has all been rushed through. It's been rushed through with the police. But it is quite right to say, and where I find there's a red line, is a chronic misuse of police time. Yeah,
when we have quite a lot of other crimes to be investigating too, including things like, I don't know, police officers being beaten up, but there we are. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us. That's Helen Fields, a former, must say, criminal barrister and author. Well, listening to all of that and joining us right now is Toby Young. He's Director of the Free Speech Union. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. We spoke to you last week about the situation with Alison Pearson, having just spoken to her on the show, and been a lot of developments in that case since. So, she says she was told it was a non-crime hate incident, but wasn't told what the tweet is. The police then have said, well, actually, no, it's actually a possible criminal incident, and it involves a tweet from a year ago, and they've revealed what the tweet is, and it's something she kind of tweeted and then deleted, having realised she'd made a mistake, thinking that it was a picture of police sort of standing, having a cosy, happy, smiley photo with pro-Palestinian march protesters, as opposed to actually it was people holding up a Pakistani flag, and it was from a completely different event, completely different place and different cause. She's been accused, though, of inciting racial hatred, which is actually a crime. What do you make of this case and the other ones that have all emerged? And it's not just Julie Bindel, it's many others as well. How much of a threat to our freedom of speech is this?
I think it is quite a significant threat to our freedom of speech. It's inevitable, people watching what's happened to Alison for tweeting something that I wouldn't have thought most people would regard as stirring up racial hatred. Not something that anyone, I think, would be concerned might meet the threshold for a criminal prosecution. And by the way, the maximum sentence, if you're found guilty of intentionally stirring up racial hatred, is 7 years. Yeah. I think many people seeing how seriously the police took a report seemingly from a woke activist resident in Brighton, a white
Shocker.
male, taking offence on behalf of the people he thought Alison had stirred up racial hatred against.
But making the complaint, we assume, in recent weeks about a tweet that was posted a year ago that was deleted within hours when it was pointed out to Alison. My guess is, I'm a middle-aged woman too, my guess is she's on her phone, she sees a picture of the police. There was a big debate at the time about police not taking action to protect people from anti-Semitic violence and threats and placards and the like, some of these pro-Palestinian marches. She sees a picture, someone has said, oh, it's outrageous, here they are cozying up. She sees it, she makes a comment about police. Again, I'm quoting her words, the original tweet, about, cozying up, I think, with the phrase, the Jew haters, people who were anti-Semitic was her view. She deleted it when it was pointed out to her, these were people, nothing to do. But the argument is, oh, well, she saw some people with brown skin and therefore assumed something. But that wasn't the... She thought it had already been identified as people. And I can completely understand why she was mistaken on that. I'm not sure I would necessarily have used the same language. But again, it is extraordinary that people can walk on the streets of our capital city every 2 weeks with some of the most extraordinary placards and chants, and they don't face arrest. But a tweet that was up for a couple of hours, which was clearly a mistake, and she deleted it, and it was a mistake, which doesn't actually contain any hatred of any particular racial group, should be investigated a year later. I mean, it is, as she said at the time, Kafkaesque, isn't it?
It is Kafkaesque. I think what may have prompted her to post that tweet is that last year, Alison and I and some other people who jointly set up an organisation called the British Friends of Israel to express our solidarity with, in particular, Britain's Jewish population, which has been living with a heightened sense of fear about their personal safety since October 7th, seeing these massive demonstrations taking place in all our major cities at that stage every weekend. She and I had asked the police while we were standing beside Churchill statue on Remembrance Sunday last year. She and I had asked the police if they would pose for a photograph with us, holding up one of our banners saying British Friends of Israel. And the police said, "Oh no, we can't do that. That would be too political, and we don't get involved in making political statements." Meanwhile, you virtually see their rainbow lanyards sticking out of their back pockets. So when Alison then saw a picture of what looked like a group of police officers posing with some pro-Palestinian protesters, she was pointing out that this was a double standard. Yes. Why are you posing with these protesters? You wouldn't pose with us. In fact, she was mistaken. It was a picture from 2 years ago of a group of police officers in Greater Manchester standing with some representatives of, I think, Imran Khan's political party in Pakistan. And when that was pointed out to her, she deleted it. I think one of the reasons the police took this so seriously, and it went round the houses. It was initially investigated by the Met, and then it went to Sussex, where I imagine because the complainant was from Sussex, eventually found its way to Essex because Alison lives in Essex. I wouldn't be surprised if the complaint itself was more than a year old, Julia, and it's just taken the police a year
I could believe that,
to actually follow it up. It was the police designated it a gold command investigation, which is usually something reserved for the most serious crimes. For instance, people suspected of terrorist offences.
Yeah. It's a tweet. It's a deleted tweet from a middle-aged woman. But this is the bizarre thing. But yet, we go back to Southport riots. I mean, and we had, numerous people, our good friend Bernie Spofforth and others facing arrest, kept in a prison cell 36 hours, thinking she was facing a couple of years behind bars and then being accused of inciting riots, which she absolutely did not do. And yet, Nick Lowles from Hope Not Hate, he wrote a tweet which was widely acknowledged even by him as being disinformation, claiming there'd been acid attacks on Muslim women, and that was bound to, massive, a completely false claim, absolutely bound to incite tensions at the time, from Muslim communities, people against some of the white demonstrators. No prosecution as far as we're aware, no action as far as we're aware. He's left that tweet up. Absolutely. There's no doubt at all. The rules are different for different people, aren't there?
But they certainly are. It's two-tier policing all the way down. one thing that may have been overlooked in this story is that there is a double standard when it comes to recording non-crime hate incidents. Yeah. Probably the best example I can think of. You remember there was a group of 14-year-old boys who got into trouble because one of them lost a bet, and his forfeit was having to bring a copy of the Quran into school. It got a little bit scuffed in the school playground, and the boys were immediately targeted by extremists in the local Muslim community. They received death threats. It was really, really horrible. And the police, instead of investigating the death threats, investigated what these boys had done and recorded that as a non-crime hate incident.
And took the mother to a meeting with a local imam and other local, supposedly self-appointed community leaders, where she had to she covered her head and sort of, grovelled, basically, please don't kill me and my family. That was basically what she did. And the police chief sat there benignly and oversaw that. Now, that I think tells us, that tells us something, doesn't it?
It does indeed. And here's another example of two-tier recording of non-crime hate incidents. So a former Conservative Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has an NCHI recorded against her for saying British jobs should go to British workers at the Conservative Party conference in 2013. The complainant there was a white male Oxford professor.
Who wasn't even there. Didn't even see the speech, just read a report about it.
Saw it on telly. Last year, the Free Speech Union swung into action to get an NCHI removed from the record of Rachel McLean MP, who was then the vice chairman of the Conservative Party. She's no longer an MP, but we did manage to get that removed. That was for misgendering a local candidate who was a man who believed he was a woman.
So correctly gendering, then?
In other words, correctly gendering them. And then the third example, Murdo Fraser, who until recently was the deputy leader of the Scottish Conservatives, he had an NCHI recorded against him when he said that he didn't think the police should be investigating people for not using the correct pronouns of children who identified as cats.
God,
I mean, it was quite incredible. I mean, the police really have had a sense of human bypass, I think, when it comes to these things.
Meanwhile, no rapes or burglaries or car thefts have taken place at all. It is mind-blowing. Can I point out, though, and I must say, because I'm a member of your union, I'm such a big fan of your work on this, these are some high-profile cases. Most cases aren't high profile. Most cases actually involve ordinary people doing very, ordinary jobs who are having their livelihoods threatened and their freedoms threatened because they have so-called committed these hate crimes or non-crime hate incidents, depending on which it is. And this is really serious business.
It is really serious. We calculate that 250,000 NCHIs have been recorded in England and Wales alone since the concept was introduced in 2014. That's an average of more than 65 a day. You wonder why, if your house gets burgled, and you call the police, they take very little interest, give you a crime reference number.
Well, they're all round Alison's asking her to put the kettle on. But there we are. Toby, we'll have to leave it there. Do come on again very soon. Toby Young, Director of the Free Speech Union. Claire Pearsall is still here. My thing is, we have Boris Johnson giving us tuppence worth. Oh, police, Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. Everybody's come out and gone, well, the police need to, worry about real crime rather than policing tweets. Boris, if only you'd been Prime Minister and could have done anything about this. This started in 2014. Yeah. It's been getting worse ever since. The Tories were in charge. This happened on your watch.
Yeah, and it shouldn't have ever happened in the first place, and somebody like Boris Johnson, being quite libertarian, should never have allowed it to continue when he became Prime Minister. But he did. He left it there, and more for him.
Absolutely. Look, Keir Starmer has already met with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, in Rio de Janeiro. They met a few hours ago. Keir Starmer has said that a strong UK-China relationship is important for both of our countries. Yeah, but the thing is, we just quite literally kowtowing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Should we be cozying up to China? Your thoughts on that announcement about this long-range missiles from the US, likely from France and Britain too, being able to be used by the Ukrainians in Russian territory. Should we be supporting that? Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. We'll get your calls up next. This is Talk.
Also, we hear that Donald Trump is quite keen on using Rwanda as a possible destination for the mass deportations. I mean, you guys have not been in favour of Rwanda, have you, Reform?
We never thought it would be a deterrent. We said, actually, the only deterrent is to do what Australia did, which is to pick up and take back.
Yeah.
And then to process rapidly and deport back to where they came from. So... but you've now got... I mean, you've got a Prime Minister that's sort of throwing cash around all over the place, whether it's Vietnam or whether it's...
It's
other
a great
nations.
idea to give Iraq some money, I've always thought. I mean, you know, what is he thinking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. To meet Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just going to squeeze in some more calls. You've been getting in touch about not just Xi Jinping and Keir Starmer meeting. Keir Starmer has said that a strong UK-China relationship is important for both our countries. But yeah, it is. But also, he's also a murderous, tyrannical dictator. Should we be cozying up to China? And what do you make of the decision by Biden just after the election and just before, of course, Donald Trump takes over in January to authorise Zelensky to use long-range weapons on Russian territory. That was the announcement we had overnight. Let me get some of your texts and tweets. Danny says, some similarities between Xi and Starmer. Starmer likes state control, is anti-free speech, anti-free thought, likes to lock people up for free speech, threatens journalists using the police, etc., etc. Oh, remarkable similarities. Carl says no way there should be not be any private talk. Starmer should stand firm. Sean says no, China are already causing unrest in this country by funding all these loony left woke ideas and organisations. Yeah, honestly, Russia and China are funding a lot of this madness. Fred says absolutely not. The Chinese should be an international pariah for the way they behave and treat their citizens. However, two-tier, free gear Keir Stasi, I love that. Two-tier free gear Keir Stasi is a Maoist, so they are his natural allies. He's already ingratiated himself with Beijing by giving them the Chagos Islands. I mean, it all adds up, I'm just saying. Let's get some calls in on Putin, actually. David is on the line. He's called up on 0344 499 1000. And David's in Essex. And David, you wanted to talk about Putin and Ukraine. What do you want to say?
Yeah, the decision to allow sort of weapons release on more sensible weaponry. The pitch that's coming back from our adversaries on their axis about, well, if you do that, you're going to be at war with Russia. Well, reality's been inverted here somehow, and they're very good at that.
Yeah.
What we really faced from the outset is Russia started the war with the West. So this is a nonsense, and it needs to be dispelled. It's very, very critical. It's something Russia and China are extremely good at, is the hybrid grey zone warfare, the disinformation.
Yeah.
And so on.
Yeah.
So what we've got here, this is lessons of war and lessons of battle. Now, for the US and the UK, this is critical because it was Douglas MacArthur who said many years ago around the Korean problem, is that we cannot allow or give away military advantage, and when war is thrust upon us, we should end it swiftly.
Yeah.
And this is the critical thing really here is that really the West has been caught napping with all this. It's gone on way too long, and we should have dealt with this the other way round.
We didn't have the military, we didn't have the armory, and we're building it up now. Right. But we could have given Ukraine enough to actually, if we want it war end, let's ensure they have victory. David, I'd love to talk to you longer. I want to squeeze in one other call before we get to a guest, but thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Let's go to John. He's in Sutton. Good morning. Oh, sorry. Good afternoon to you, John. What do you want to say?
Afternoon, Julia. Yeah, I think that they've decided to escalate to de-escalate, because everyone's asking, why has Biden made the decision now, right at the end of his term? Well, personally, I don't think there's that much between Trump and Biden on this. Oh. I think they both understand that there's going to have to be a negotiated settlement, and what they're doing, they're escalating so that in any future negotiations Trump has with Putin, he can say, well, I will reverse the decision Biden made, but you are going to have to give me something substantial to take back to Zelensky.
Wait a minute, do you think this might have been something that came up at the White House last week when Biden invited Trump in?
Yes, I do. You took the words out of my mouth.
You think they'd work together like that? I mean, they were very chummy, but the thing is, I think Biden didn't announce this because he knew it would go down badly with the electorate. That's why he didn't. That's why he didn't announce it before November the 5th.
It's a very risky tactic to escalate to de-escalate.
Is it? Is it risky to give a democratic ally the tools to be able to fight away their murderous dictator invader? I'd have thought that was a rather sensible, common sense thing to do.
Well, I do too, but it is risky still because, I mean, we don't know exactly what Russia will do. But at least Trump can now say, right, I can reverse the decision. You now have to give me something to bring to Zelensky, and that could be the first step along the path.
Very interesting. Yeah, I don't want this to be negotiated away. I want us to give Zelensky the tools to win and people of Ukraine to be able to live without Russian forces in their land. But, you know, I'm old-fashioned like that. John, great call. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go to a quick break, and then we're going to be talking about more on Donald Trump, actually, and a number of his appointees, in particular his new energy secretary, who is an oil and gas executive. And, oh, by the way, doesn't think there's a climate crisis. Are things looking up, folks? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:38 is the time. Let's talk more about Donald Trump and, of course, the next President of the United States and a lot of his new appointees to the White House who are going to take over on January the 20th, causing quite a stir, not least his brand new energy secretary. He's a fracking oil and gas executive called Chris Wright, who has said in public, on record, that he doesn't believe there is a climate crisis. So are things looking up? Well, let's talk about this with Ross Clark. He's the author of the brilliant book, Not net zero, how an irrational target will impoverish you, help China and won't even save the planet. Good afternoon to you, Ross.
Good afternoon, Julia.
I have a funny feeling that Chris Wright may have read your book, Ross. What do you make of the appointment of Chris Wright? Because obviously it's upset all the right people. Is it a good appointment?
Well, Trump's genius, as we know, is to do everything, appoint the people that will upset his enemies the most. And I think it's another example of that. And, yeah, I mean, Chris Wright is he's possibly not the best person for the job in the sense that he is a vested interest. Obviously, he's CEO of Liberty Energy, a fracking company. Yeah. He's also got an interest, by the way, in nuclear energy, small modular nuclear energies. So he does know his subject. He knows what energy is about. He knows how you produce energy, and that's expertise, which is not actually a bad thing to have in government. And
no, I would have thought. I mean, the funny thing is, an awful lot of the people are, you know, they've got skin in the game. Even Ed Miliband here, as our energy secretary, has got skin in the game because they just totally signed up to this green world. And you all know perfectly well, the moment they leave office, they'll all go off and get themselves a lovely little directorship, or if not 15 of them earning money with these green companies, which they've helped to feather the nest of. They're all at it and they're all up to their eyeballs. So I haven't got an issue with that. But he's been very clear. He just says there's no climate crisis. He said we're not in the midst of an energy transition either. And he said basically. He's I don't they say climate change skeptic, but he says he doesn't care where energy comes from, quote, as long as it's secure, reliable, affordable and betters human lives. Gosh, this used to be how most governments thought, didn't it?
Exactly. I mean, the idea that should be a controversial view is quite absurd, isn't it? I mean, you know, energy security is absolutely paramount. And, you know, it's quite clear that Chris Wright's mind is on the ball there. As regards some things he said on climate change, I mean, from what I've seen, you know, he said, for example, you know, it's scaremongering to say there's been an increase in the number or severity of hurricanes. Well, I mean, that actually is the view of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the US government body, which studied hurricanes more than anybody.
But it's not the view, it's a factual statement. I mean, this is it. So much of what people believe about climate and about climate change and all, and the stuff that's put out by sort of the green agenda is simply factually untrue or out of date and has been superseded. Like, you know, if one more person says to me, oh, the Maldives are disappearing and the, you know, the Great Barrier Reef's disappeared. Well, no, neither of these things are true. And you'd only, polar bears are dying out. No, that's not true either. More forest fires. Not true. I mean, it is extraordinary. More people are dying as a result of climate change. Not true. Far fewer. It is quite terrifying how much nonsense people have been told and believe.
Yeah, I mean, let's get it straight. I mean, global temperatures are increasing, and that has probably got the paw prints of man-made global emissions on it.
Might do, might not.
That's true. But, yeah, so much of what is said about extreme weather and all the other... you know, is exaggerated, it's scaremongering, and it doesn't fit with observed evidence. And, you know, we've had this morning, this report from Carbon Brief claiming that, you know, all these 700 climate forms of extreme weather have been caused by climate change. Well, actually, when you dig down into it, you get so much of this comes from sort of modelled studies which involve computer modelling, and they're actually finding, you know, against real observable evidence.
You might use a model if you don't have real world evidence, but once you have real world evidence, you should look at that, which links us actually to China, because this is fascinating. Keir Starmer has now had his one-on-one meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping on the fringes of the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, talking about a strong UK-China relationship is important for both of our countries, and we've been asking people whether we should be cozying up with China. But part of your book title, is how irrational target on eco targets is going to help China. There's no doubt at all that on this issue, talking about the energy secretary in the States, China is laughing right now, aren't they? Because they're not only able to power their country with cheap energy, with fossil fuels. They're also using that to power the factories, which we can't afford to run anymore because our energy is so expensive, to make all of the wind turbines and solar panels that we're importing to make ourselves poorer and less energy secure. And they're having a field day.
They are. It's no wonder that Keir Starmer feels the need to talk to Xi Jinping. Britain has become pathetically dependent on China as a result of this net zero thing. As you say, you know, it's China that is making all the solar panels, all the wind turbines, and increasing numbers of batteries for electric cars. Yeah. Sold in Europe, and you know, why have they been able to corner the market? Well, because they've got cheap energy. They've got 60% of their energy still comes from coal, by the way. Yeah. So you know, all those sort of Ed Miliband's solar panels, as well as being made by slave labour, they're also being made thanks to large quantities of fossil fuels. Now, China is investing in wind energy. It's investing in solar energy for itself as well as exporting it to Britain. But there's an underlying, you know, theme of what China is doing. It will seek clean energy, but it will not do so at the cost to economic growth. Yeah. And that's clearly what the Trump government is going to be doing. It's what the Biden government has been doing. Yeah. No other country in the world seems quite as obsessed as we are at achieving a sort of net zero target at any cost.
But I thought not only are our leaders virtue signalling, by the way, Tories just as bad as Labour on this, and Lib Dems and Greens and everybody else, but we're supposed to be leading the world and inspiring everyone else to follow suit, and everyone else is going, OK, off you go, we're just going to carry on as we were.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, you know, you think when Britain introduced this net zero by 2050 target in 2019, without even a vote in the House of Commons.
Or any research, it would appear, or cost-benefit analysis, or anything useful.
No, exactly, none of that. And the idea was, is it going to inspire other countries to follow suit? And, well, other countries have made these targets, but they made it absolutely clear that they are not going to pursue you know, net zero at the cost of economic growth. And all these countries which go and sign those declarations at the COP meetings, Canada increasing fossil fuel output, Biden's America was increasing fossil fuel output. Brazil has you know, even under its new, progressive approved president is seeking to be the world's fourth largest oil producer by the end of this decade.
Meanwhile, we're going to put some solar panels on some new builds and make everyone have a heat pump and go, aren't we wonderful? Can I ask you just finally, I mean, by the way, we should be laughing at the COP29 summit, which Keir Starmer did a whistle-stop tour in and out. One of that would have been his 14th trip abroad. This is his 15th to Rio since becoming Prime Minister in July. I don't know how he can justify all these journeys, because apparently we're all supposed to be only having one trip a year. But it'd be OK, because important people and rich people are allowed to do it, obviously. But 470 British delegates attended the COP summit in Azerbaijan. I wonder how many would have gone if it had been a fun and nice country. Next time it's in Brazil, I bet it'll be double that, won't it?
I'm sure it will be. I mean, Britain was sort of taking COP29 a little more seriously than other countries. Biden didn't go, Macron didn't go, Olaf Scholz didn't go. You know, Xi Jinping didn't go. You know, we were there sort of. Starmer turned up, as he said, to lead the world on this issue. Well, he turned up and found there wasn't much of a world to lead, really.
Indeed. We'll leave it there, Ross Clark. Always so good to talk to you. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. 12:47 is the time. Quick word from Claire.
You can imagine Keir Starmer and his entourage sort of piling in, going, it's here, we're here, it's all right, everybody, we'll save the world.
No queue at the buffet.
That's true, or at the bar. We shouldn't queue at bars. Let's be British about it.
Oh, God, totally with you on that one. Seriously, as an ex-barmaid, I can always... I know who's next.
You know who's next, exactly.
I'll give you a top tip, by the way. If you've got coins, you're at a bar, this big fussy. If you bang your credit card or anything on the bar, you're not getting served.
Exactly.
Just so you know. 12:48 is the time. Up next, we are going to be talking to some of the latest woke madness. Amazing protests at Wembley. More plan over a ban over a young woman who was banned from actually attending any football matches. Why are the Lionesses for not standing up for women's rights versus trans rights? And we're also going to be talking about a lady who is suing her former employer after they got rid of women-only toilets and replaced them with gender-neutral ones. That's up next. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The idea of going on what I call the Taliban cop conference.
Yes.
Was just absurd.
With, by the way, 470 other people he took with him.
Of whom 350 were public servants.
Yeah.
I mean, I call it the Everest of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
They were basically going on their own net zero holiday. That's what it was.
Yeah.
At our expense. Millions and millions of pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you needed 20 officials. You didn't need 350.
What did you do with it? Yeah, I mean, 470 people.
But don't worry, the BBC sent only 30, so that's fine.
30. Brilliant. Unbelievable.
The UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Right now, let's turn our attention to, well, you know, some of the latest woke stories that are impacting particularly women's rights. And a protest had happened yesterday at a men's Nations League game against the Republic of Ireland. More than 200 women and men descended on Wembley amid growing outrage over a 6-match suspension imposed on a 17-year-old with suspected autism, who wept about being grilled about her comments simply for asking a bearded transgender person, "Are you a man?" Well, it seems to me to be a fairly reasonable thing to ask. We talked about that story before. But 1205 is now a UK protest collective. They want to raise awareness of the various injustices for women posed by men claiming to be women. And they've said, basically, we need to take action, and they're planning another protest very soon as well. Delighted to say that writer and co-founder of 1205, Jean Hatchett, joins us right now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I remember talking about this case involving this 17-year-old, and it wasn't just extraordinary because, I mean, she just hadn't done anything wrong for the first point, and even if she had, that ban. But the FA basically banned her from matches. Football is her life. She's absolutely distraught about this. And you and your fellow protesters have said, we're going to stand up for her. So what have your protests involved? And why also are you called 1205? 1205, sorry.
Yeah, we initially got together as a group of women from different groups, actually, and we decided we'd work together in support of the German women in the introduction of self-ID, which happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And then we stayed together and said, right, OK, what do we do next? What else can we look at which is really fundamentally unfair for women? And there are so many things, as you well know. So we decided that in this specific instance, it was so blatantly unfair. It was persecution by a large organisation, a large captured organisation who seem to believe that men can become women simply by saying so, even if they've got a beard or whatever. And we're just not prepared to indulge that kind of delusional fantasy or whatever it is, because you're actually, taking away, like you say, the opportunities to play sport for girls and women. Because if there's one bloke with a beard on that team, that's
or without a beard, but a bloke.
Or without a beard, it doesn't matter. He's a man, and that is what she correctly said. It's like, this was the truth.
Yeah.
She asked the question, "Are you a man?" And the answer can only be one thing: yes.
And whether or not he thinks he is or he doesn't think he is, I don't really care, because you either are a man or you're not. But either way, a question it can't be, shouldn't be an issue anyway. But it's interesting. I say this 1205 comes from the German phrase 1205, and it's sort of a phrase meaning it's just too late. Women are standing up and having enough of this. What I love is also how many dads, how many men have just said, no, it's not happening to my daughter. They're seeing this happening. They're fed up with it. They don't want the boys in the girls' changing rooms or the girls' toilets. Everyone is waking up to this. Are you hopeful that, I mean, you might not be a Trump fan. I'm not a Trump fan as a person, as a human being, but actually Donald Trump being elected in the White House in America, we're downstream from everything culturally that happens in America, that actually he's going to put a stop to a lot of this madness happening in sport, happening in, I mean, you know, Leah Thomas, the swimmer, was a key part of people becoming aware of the unfairness of the 6'1" bloke beating women in swimming. What a surprise. That actually he can put a stop to this, and that will help bring the sanity back here as well.
I think, you know, we're not called Turf Island for nothing. Women here have been fighting this, even you know, when things were being overturned in the US and the madness really took hold there, and there were some terrifying things happening for women there. Here, we haven't stopped. You know, we've just grown in strength. There are so many advocacy groups. We're just one of them. We're all working in the same direction, loosely and broadly. We haven't been able to get the Labour Party to pay any attention at all to what they should be paying attention to. But we're going to get on the streets. You know, that's what we have decided as a group.
When's your next protest?
We're just looking at a few things, actually, that we can do around this issue. So potentially, well, we're definitely going to turn up to the Lionesses match in Sheffield.
And have you had much support from the Lionesses? Because they were very big, aren't they, about after the Euros, supporting their, you know, the winning captain of the winning team when she was, you know, being kissed outrageously by her. Was it German? Dutch, I can't remember where they were from. Spanish? Spanish, yes, Spanish. So Claire's helped me out there. They were very big on women's rights there. And, have the Lionesses joined your campaign?
Well, we've been asking this of a number of high-profile sports people. You know, I've been asking in short videos, when are you going to stand up for the girls who are coming after you, or the girls that are, you know, maybe not even going to get to the stage where they can play? The Lionesses have had this huge career, fabulous support from all of us. We all love them. But where are they? Because they are letting down this girl, but also girls like her that are watching and thinking, well, we can't say that, we can't object, this will happen to us too.
Absolutely.
And that's why, you know, we as largely a bunch of middle-aged women.
It's funny how middle-aged women, we're just kind of not prepared to be pushed around, are we? Gina Hatchett, please come on the show again. It's so nice. I'm sorry we didn't have too much time, but it's so good to speak to you. Well done, you. She's one of us. We like this. Writer and co-founder of 1205. Thank you for that. Claire Pearsall, your thoughts on this?
I mean, it's just beggars belief that here we are in 2024. Still having this conversation about a bearded opponent. No offence to your
beard or no beard. It's like you're either a man or you're a woman. But also, I mean, it's just... I mean, again, there's another story we didn't even have a chance to get to. Sarah Holman, again, handed out of a job, Bracknell Forest Council. She complained to HR.